Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Accident. The fluorescent lights in Riverside General Hospital cast a sickly pallor over everything they touched. Robert Bobby Hutchinson stood outside room 314, his calloused hands gripping a cup of cold coffee that had long since lost any appeal. Through the small window, he could see his 17-year-old son Tommy lying motionless, tubes and wires creating a mechanical spider web around his still form. Bobby had built his construction empire from nothing, starting with a single hammer and a willingness to work 18-hour days. At 45, his weathered face told the story of every foundation he'd poured, every beam he'd raised, every rival he'd crushed to reach the top. Hutchinson Construction dominated the tri-state area, and Bobby's reputation for getting things done, by any means necessary, preceded him into every boardroom and job site. But none of that mattered now. Not with Tommy fighting for his life. Dr. Patricia Reeves emerged from the room, her expression carefully neutral. Bobby had dealt with enough people in crisis to read the signs. The slight downturn of her mouth, the way she avoided direct eye contact, the hesitation before speaking. "Mr. Hutchinson, I need to be direct with you," she began, pulling off her latex gloves. "The brain trauma from the motorcycle accident is severe. There's significant swelling, and despite our best efforts—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "There's little chance he'll wake up. I'm sorry." The words hit Bobby like a sledgehammer to the chest, but his expression didn't change. Years of high-stakes negotiations had taught him to never show weakness, never let the other side see you bleed. "What about Linda?" Dr. Reeves asked, glancing around. "Where's your wife?" Bobby's jaw tightened imperceptibly. She had somewhere else to be. The truth was more pathetic than he cared to admit. When the hospital had called 3 hours ago, Linda had been getting ready for one of her charity galas, some fundraiser for the Arts Council that she claimed was too important to miss. Even when Bobby told her about Tommy's accident, she'd insisted she had to make an appearance first. "I'll just show my face for an hour," she'd said, applying lipstick in their bedroom mirror. "You can handle things at the hospital until I get there." Handle things. As if their son's potential death was just another construction project to manage. Bobby entered Tommy's room alone, the steady beep of monitors providing a mechanical heartbeat. He pulled a chair close to the bed and studied his son's face, so much like his own at that age, before life had hardened Bobby's features into something more intimidating than handsome. Tommy had always been different from Bobby. Where Bobby was calculating and ruthless, Tommy was idealistic and gentle. The boy read books instead of blueprints, preferred photography to power tools, and actually seemed to believe that people were fundamentally good. Bobby had worried that such naivety would get Tommy eaten alive in the real world. He'd never imagined it might literally get him killed. The motorcycle had been a compromise. Tommy's 18th birthday was next month, and he'd been begging for one for years. Linda had been against it, claiming it was too dangerous, but Bobby had seen it as a chance to teach the boy some practical skills. Now Tommy lay broken because Bobby had given in to his son's request. Reaching out, Bobby gently took Tommy's hand, careful not to disturb the 4 lines. The boy's skin was cold, and Bobby found himself rubbing Tommy's fingers, trying to warm them. That's when he felt it, something small and hard pressing against his palm from Tommy's jacket pocket. Bobby frowned and carefully reached in, pulling out a small brass key attached to a simple metal ring. Dangling from the ring was a folded piece of paper, about the size of a business card. Bobby unfolded the note with growing confusion. The handwriting was shaky, hurried, definitely Tommy's, but written in obvious distress. "Mom, use this to unlock what's inside. You need to know the truth about Derek before it's too late. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you myself. T. Derek." Bobby knew that name, though he'd only met the man twice. Derek Manning was Linda's new business partner in her interior design firm. A smooth-talking 38-year-old who'd moved to town 6 months ago and somehow convinced Linda to bring him on as co-owner of her struggling company. Bobby had never liked Derek. There was something too polished about him, too rehearsed. He spoke like a man who'd spent years perfecting the art of telling people what they wanted to hear. When Bobby had suggested running a background check, standard practice for anyone involved in Linda's business, she'd laughed it off. "He's not building skyscrapers, Bobby. He's helping me pick out curtains and paint colors." But this note suggested Tommy had discovered something about Derek that Linda didn't know. Something serious enough that a 17-year-old boy felt compelled to investigate and document it. Something that might have led to his accident. Bobby studied the key more closely. It was small, the kind used for filing cabinets, safety deposit boxes, or lockers. No identifying marks or numbers. Tommy could have hidden whatever this unlocked anywhere. The door opened, and Bobby quickly pocketed the key and note. But instead of Linda, a police officer entered. Detective Ray Morrison, a gruff man in his 50s whom Bobby recognized from various city council meetings. "Mr. Hutchinson," Morrison nodded grimly. "I wanted to follow up on the accident report." "What's the follow-up?" "Tommy lost control of his bike and hit a tree." Morrison consulted his notepad. "That's what it looked like initially, but the crash investigation team found something interesting. The bike's brake lines had been cut, not completely severed, but scored deep enough that they'd fail under pressure." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "You're saying someone sabotaged his motorcycle?" "That's what the evidence suggests. We're treating this as attempted murder now." Morrison's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry, Bobby. I know this makes everything worse." Bobby's mind raced. Tommy had discovered something about Derek, something significant enough to hide evidence and leave cryptic notes. And now someone had tried to kill Tommy, possibly to keep him quiet. The pieces were starting to form a picture, and Bobby didn't like what he was seeing. "Any idea who might have wanted to hurt Tommy?" Morrison asked. No, Bobby lied smoothly. Everyone loved Tommy. He didn't have enemies. But Bobby was already thinking about Derek Manning, about the way the man always seemed to know just a little too much about Linda's schedule, about how he'd been pushing Linda to take on bigger projects that required her to travel more often, about how Linda had been different lately, more secretive, more defensive, more distant. Morrison left his card and promised to keep Bobby updated. Alone again with his unconscious son, Bobby pulled out the key and note, studying them by the harsh hospital lighting. Tommy had been trying to protect Linda from something. The boy had discovered Derek's true nature and had been gathering evidence. But before he could reveal the truth, someone had tried to silence him permanently. Bobby felt a familiar coldness settling into his chest, the same feeling he got when a competitor tried to undercut one of his bids or when a supplier attempted to cheat him. It was the feeling that preceded calculated, methodical destruction. Whoever had hurt Tommy had made the biggest mistake of their lives. Bobby Hutchinson had built his empire by never backing down from a fight and never forgetting those who crossed him. He'd started with nothing and crushed everyone who'd stood in his way. Now someone had touched his family, had tried to kill his son. They were going to learn why Bobby's competitors feared him, why his enemies didn't stay enemies for long, and why crossing a Hutchinson was the last mistake anyone ever made. Bobby squeezed Tommy's hand gently, then stood up. He had a key to follow and truth to uncover. And once he knew exactly who was responsible for this, he was going to make them pay in ways they'd never imagined possible. The games were over. The war had begun. Chapter 2, The Box. Bobby left the hospital at dawn, after spending the night watching Tommy's monitors and turning the mysterious key over in his hands. Linda had never shown up, texting around midnight that the charity event had run late and she'd see him in the morning. Bobby had responded with a simple okay that carried none of the volcanic rage building inside him. The Hutchinson estate sat on 40 acres outside town, a sprawling ranch house that Bobby had built with his own hands 15 years ago. As he pulled through the iron gates, he noticed Derek's black BMW wasn't in the driveway. Good. He needed time to search without interruption. Linda was in the kitchen wearing a silk robe, her perfectly styled blonde hair betraying no sign she'd been sleeping. At 41, she maintained the kind of polished beauty that required significant investment. Regular spa treatments, personal trainers, and the best cosmetic dermatologist money could buy. Bobby had been happy to pay for it all back when he believed she was worth it. "How's Tommy?" she asked. not looking up from her coffee cup. Alive. No change. Bobby studied her face for any hint of genuine concern. He saw none. Nice gala last night. Lovely. We raised over $200,000 for the Arts Center. She finally met his eyes. I'm sorry I couldn't get away earlier. You know how these things are. Once you're there, it's impossible to leave gracefully. Bobby nodded, filing away another lie. He'd called the Arts Center at midnight. The gala had ended at 10:30. Where's Derek this morning? How would I know? Linda's response came too quickly, too defensively. He's probably at his apartment. Another lie. Derek had bought a house on Elm Street 3 months ago. Bobby had seen the deed records when he'd started doing some quiet research on his wife's business partner. Linda knew exactly where Derek lived. I need to shower and get back to the hospital, Bobby said. The police want to ask me some more questions. He watched Linda's face carefully. There, just a flicker of something. Fear? Guilt? Police? Why would they need to ask you questions? Tommy's brake lines were cut. They're treating it as attempted murder now. Linda's coffee cup rattled against the saucer as she set it down. That's impossible. Who would want to hurt Tommy? Good question. Bobby headed toward the stairs. I'm sure they'll figure it out. In their bedroom, Bobby went through the motions of gathering clothes while mentally cataloging every place Tommy might have hidden whatever the key unlocked. The boy was methodical, like his father, but also sentimental. He wouldn't put important evidence somewhere completely random. It would be somewhere meaningful, somewhere safe. Bobby's eyes fell on the family portrait hanging above their dresser. Taken 2 years ago, it showed the 3 of them at their lake house, all smiling at the camera. But Bobby remembered that day differently now. Linda had been checking her phone constantly, claiming she was waiting for an important client call. Derek had been texting her frequently around that time, supposedly about business. The lake house. Tommy loved that place, had spent countless summers there fishing and reading. If he'd wanted to hide something important, somewhere his mother might think to look but Derek wouldn't know about, the lake house would be perfect. Bobby dressed quickly and headed downstairs. Linda was on the phone in her study, speaking in hushed tones. He caught fragments as he passed. Told you this was a mistake. And need to be more careful now. She ended the call when she saw him. That was Derek. He wanted to know how Tommy was doing. Thoughtful of him. Bobby left without saying goodbye, his mind already racing ahead. The lake house was an hour drive, enough time to think through everything he knew and plan his next moves. 20 years ago, Bobby had been a different man. Young, trusting, madly in love with the beautiful receptionist at the architectural firm where he'd worked as a junior contractor. Linda had been sweet then, or at least good at pretending to be. She'd supported his dream of starting his own company, had even suggested the name Hutchinson Construction. But success had changed her. As Bobby's company grew and the money rolled in, Linda had developed expensive tastes and a social circle that looked down on Bobby's blue-collar roots. She'd started taking trips to New York for design inspiration, joining country clubs where Bobby felt like a fraud in his expensive suits, and surrounding herself with people who saw him as nothing more than a wallet with legs. Derek Manning represented everything Bobby wasn't: cultured, refined, educated at the right schools. He spoke fluent French, had studied art history in Paris, and could discuss wine and literature with the kind of casual expertise that made Bobby feel like the high school dropout he was. Bobby had built an empire, but Derek had been born into one. Old money, old family, old connections. The kind of man Linda had probably wished she'd married instead of the rough construction worker who'd gotten lucky. The lake house came into view as Bobby rounded the final curve. It was smaller than their main home, but more honest somehow. Cedar logs and native stone, built to complement the landscape rather than dominate it. Tommy had helped Bobby build the dock when he was 12. More hindrance than help, but eager to learn. Bobby parked and walked the property, thinking like Tommy would think. Where would a 17-year-old hide something important? Somewhere his parents might look, but a stranger wouldn't think to search. The old tool shed behind the house caught his eye. Bobby had built it for storing lake equipment, but Tommy had claimed half of it years ago for his photography supplies. Bobby tried the door. Locked, but with a simple padlock that looked newer than the shed itself. The brass key fit perfectly. Inside, Bobby found Tommy's photography equipment neatly arranged on makeshift shelves. But in the back corner sat a small fireproof safe, the kind used for important documents. It had an electronic lock, and scotch taped to the top was a piece of paper with a 6-digit code written in Tommy's handwriting. Bobby's hands shook slightly as he entered the numbers. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside were dozens of photographs, printed on photo paper with professional clarity. Bobby's blood turned to ice as he recognized the subjects. Linda and Derek, captured in intimate moments that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. The photos were dated, some going back nearly 8 months. Derek kissing Linda in his car. Linda leaving Derek's house early in the morning. The two of them in passionate embraces in locations Bobby recognized. Hotel lobbies, restaurant parking lots, even the back office of Linda's design firm. But the photos weren't just evidence of an affair. They told a more sinister story. Several showed Derek meeting with unfamiliar men in dark clothing. Meetings that took place in parking garages and abandoned buildings. In one series, Derek was handing over what looked like blueprints or documents. In another, he was receiving a thick envelope from a man with gang tattoos visible on his neck. At the bottom of the stack was a manila folder labeled Derek Manning Research in Tommy's careful handwriting. Inside, Bobby found printouts of news articles from Derek's previous cities: Portland, Seattle, Phoenix. A pattern emerged. Derek would arrive in a city, charm his way into partnerships with successful local businesses, and those businesses would suffer mysterious setbacks. Fires, thefts, accidents that destroyed inventory or damaged reputations. The final document made Bobby's blood run cold. It was a copy of a life insurance policy, one Bobby didn't recognize. Linda had taken out a $2 million policy on Tommy's life 6 months ago, with herself as the sole beneficiary. A handwritten note from Tommy was clipped to the policy. Found this in Mom's desk. She never told Dad. Why would she need this much insurance on me? Bobby sank into an old lawn chair, the full scope of the betrayal hitting him like a physical blow. This wasn't just an affair. Linda and Derek had been planning something bigger, something that involved Tommy's death and a massive insurance payout. Tommy had discovered their plan and been gathering evidence to expose them. But before he could reveal the truth, they tried to eliminate him permanently. The brake lines hadn't been cut by some random criminal. They'd been sabotaged by Derek on Linda's orders to silence their son and claim the insurance money. Bobby's phone buzzed with a text from Linda. "Where are you?" "Derek's coming over to discuss some business." "Thought you'd want to know." Derek was coming to the house, probably to search for any evidence Tommy might have hidden, to tie up loose ends before the police investigation got too close. Bobby carefully repacked everything in the safe, locked it, and pocketed the key. Then he pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he needed. "Marcus? It's Bobby Hutchinson. I need you and the boys to meet me at my house in an hour. Full crew." "And Marcus?" "Bring the special tools." Marcus Rodriguez had worked for Bobby for 15 years, starting as a day laborer and working his way up to foreman. But more importantly, Marcus and his crew handled Bobby's special projects, the jobs that required discretion and absolute loyalty. Competitors who tried to sabotage Bobby's projects. Suppliers who attempted to double-cross him. City inspectors who demanded unreasonable bribes. Marcus never asked questions, never left loose ends, and never disappointed Bobby. His crew was made up of men who understood that some problems couldn't be solved through legal channels. As Bobby drove back toward town, his mind was already working through the logistics. Derek and Linda thought they were dealing with a grieving father who would be too distracted by his son's condition to notice their deception. They were about to learn that they'd gravely underestimated Bobby Hutchinson. He'd built his empire by being smarter, tougher, and more ruthless than everyone else. He'd crushed competitors who tried to destroy him, eliminated threats before they could fully develop, and never once shown mercy to those who betrayed his trust. Derek and Linda had tried to murder his son for money. They betrayed everything Bobby held sacred, violated the one rule that could never be broken: you don't touch family. Now, they were going to pay for that mistake with everything they had, everything they were, and everything they ever hoped to be. Bobby Hutchinson was done being the grieving father. It was time to remind everyone why his enemies didn't stay enemies for long. Chapter 3. The Truth Unveiled. Bobby arrived at his estate 30 minutes before Derek was scheduled to appear. Marcus and his crew were already waiting. 5 men who'd been with Bobby through every ugly situation his business had required. They sat in Marcus's van, engines running, faces hidden behind the tinted windows. Marcus stepped out as Bobby parked. At 52, he was built like a fire hydrant, short, thick, and impossible to move when he didn't want to be moved. His hands were scarred from 20 years of construction work, but Bobby knew they were equally skilled at more delicate tasks. "What's the situation, boss?" Marcus's voice carried the flat tone of a man who'd seen everything and been surprised by nothing. "My wife and her boyfriend tried to murder my son. They're coming here to clean up evidence." Bobby handed Marcus a copy of Tommy's photos. "I need them alive for questioning." After that, he shrugged. Disposal. Marcus glanced through the photos without expression. "How long do we have?" "Derek should be here in 20 minutes. Linda's inside." "Weapons." "Derek might be armed. He's been meeting with some rough characters. Linda's probably just scared." Bobby checked his watch. "I want to talk to them first. Get the full confession on record. Then you boys can take over." The crew dispersed around the property with military precision. Bobby had learned years ago that when you needed serious problems solved, you hired serious men. Marcus's team included 2 ex-military specialists, a former police detective who'd been forced into early retirement, and a demolitions expert who officially worked removing old buildings but unofficially made problems disappear completely. Bobby entered his house through the back door. Linda was in her study, frantically going through file cabinets and desk drawers. She looked up as he entered, guilt written across her face. "You're back early," she said, trying to sound casual while shoving papers into her purse. "Looking for something specific." "Just some insurance documents." "For Tommy." The lie came easily, but her hands were shaking. Bobby leaned against the doorframe, studying the woman he'd loved for 20 years. She was still beautiful, still poised, but now he could see the calculation behind her every expression. How long had she been planning this? How many times had she looked at Tommy and seen dollar signs instead of their son? "Find what you needed?" "Not yet. The filing system in here is chaos." Linda forced a smile. "Maybe you could help me look? I'm sure Derek will be more helpful." "When's he getting here?" Linda's face went pale. "Derek? I don't think—" The front doorbell rang, cutting off her lie. Bobby smiled coldly. Right on time. He walked to the front door, aware that Linda was following at a distance. Through the peephole, he could see Derek standing on the porch, looking casual in expensive slacks and a polo shirt. The man checked his watch, then glanced around nervously. Bobby opened the door with a welcoming smile. "Derek, what a pleasant surprise." "Bobby." Derek's handshake was firm, his smile practiced. "I heard about Tommy. Terrible thing. Linda asked me to stop by and see if there's anything I can do to help." "That's very thoughtful. Come in." Bobby led Derek into the living room, where Linda was now sitting on the couch, her purse clutched tightly in her lap. The 3 of them formed an awkward triangle, and Bobby could feel the tension radiating from his wife and her lover. "Can I get you something to drink?" Bobby asked pleasantly. "I'm fine, thanks." Derek sat down across from Linda, careful to maintain appropriate distance. "How is Tommy doing? Any improvement?" "The doctors say there's little chance he'll wake up." Bobby watched Derek's face carefully. There, just a flicker of satisfaction before the man rearranged his features into appropriate concern. "But you probably already knew that." Derek frowned. "I'm sorry. I don't understand." Bobby pulled out his phone and scrolled to the photo of Derek meeting with the tattooed man. He held it up for both of them to see. "I found Tommy's little photography project. Kid had quite an eye for capturing interesting moments." Linda gasped, her face draining of color. Derek went very still, his practiced charm evaporating. "I don't know what you think that photo shows," Derek began. "I think it shows you meeting with criminals to arrange my son's murder." Bobby's voice remained conversational. "Along with about 50 other photos of you and my wife planning to cash in on Tommy's life insurance policy." Linda started to cry, real tears, but Bobby suspected they were for herself rather than Tommy. Derek, however, remained calm. Too calm. You're upset, Derek said carefully. Grief can make people see things that aren't there, connect dots that don't actually. 3 months ago, you convinced Linda to increase Tommy's life insurance to $2 million. 2 months ago, you started meeting with people who specialize in making accidents happen. Last week, you cut my son's brake lines. Bobby stood up slowly. The only thing I don't understand is whether Linda came up with the plan or if you talked her into it. Derek's composure finally cracked. His hand moved toward his jacket pocket, but Bobby was ready for it. I wouldn't, Bobby said quietly. You're surrounded. As if on cue, Marcus appeared in the doorway behind Derek, while 2 other crew members entered through the kitchen. Derek's hand froze halfway to his weapon. Bobby, please, Linda sobbed. You don't understand. Derek said we could be together, that we could start over somewhere new, but we needed money. Real money. And Tommy was going to college soon anyway, and the insurance was just sitting there. Just sitting there, Bobby repeated. Our son's life was just an inconvenient obstacle to your retirement plans. Derek slowly raised his hands. Look, Hutchinson, let's discuss this rationally. You're a businessman. You understand that sometimes difficult decisions have to be made for the greater good. Bobby stared at him in amazement. Even caught red-handed, Derek was trying to negotiate. The greater good? You tried to murder my son for money. Your son discovered something he shouldn't have, Derek said coldly, his mask finally slipping completely. He was going to ruin everything. We had no choice. There's always a choice. Bobby nodded to Marcus, who stepped forward and efficiently removed a pistol from Derek's jacket. You chose to be a predator. Linda chose money over family. Tommy chose to be a hero and try to save his mother from a monster. Bobby pulled out the insurance policy Tommy had found. $2 million. Is that really what you thought my son's life was worth? It was enough for us to disappear, Linda whispered. To start over somewhere Derek's past wouldn't follow him. Derek's past? Bobby looked at the man with renewed interest. You mean the 3 other cities where businesses mysteriously burned down after you became a partner? The insurance fraud investigations that always seemed to go cold right before charges were filed. Derek's eyes widened. Tommy's research had been even more thorough than Bobby had realized. The kid figured out your whole operation, Bobby continued. You target successful women with failing businesses. Promise them partnership and romance. Then arrange accidents that trigger insurance payouts before disappearing to the next city. Except this time, you decided my son was worth more dead than Linda's business was worth saving. The boy was getting too close, Derek snarled. Another few days, and he would have gone to the police. We had to act. Bobby felt the last of his restraint evaporate. For months, he'd watched Derek charm his wife, had tolerated the man's presence in his home, had even tried to like him for Linda's sake. All while Derek had been planning to murder Tommy for insurance money. Marcus, Bobby said quietly, take them to the warehouse. Keep them comfortable but secure. I need to make some arrangements. Bobby, you can't do this. Linda struggled as Marcus's men lifted her from the couch. I'm your wife. We can work this out. You stopped being my wife the moment you chose him over our son. Bobby's voice was cold as winter steel. You became a stranger who tried to murder my child for money. Derek didn't beg or plead. He just stared at Bobby with pure hatred. You think you've won something? You have no idea who you're dealing with. My associates won't let this slide. Your associates? Bobby laughed harshly. You mean the bottom feeders who cut brake lines for cash? They're going to be too busy running for their lives to worry about you. As Marcus's crew led Derek and Linda away, Bobby pulled out his phone and dialed Detective Morrison's direct number. Morrison? Bobby Hutchinson. I found out who tried to kill my son, but there's been a complication. The suspects have disappeared. I think they might be running. Yes, I'll come in first thing tomorrow to give you everything I have. After hanging up, Bobby stood alone in his living room, surrounded by the wreckage of 20 years of marriage. Photos of family vacations smiled down at him from every surface. Images of a life that had been built on lies, of a wife who'd been calculating his son's worth in dollars while posing for happy family pictures. Tomorrow, he would give the police enough evidence to trigger a massive manhunt for Derek and Linda. He would play the role of the devastated husband who discovered his wife's betrayal too late to save her from her own poor choices. But tonight, Derek and Linda would learn exactly what happened to people who tried to destroy Bobby Hutchinson's family. Bobby walked to his liquor cabinet and poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon, the good stuff he'd been saving for Tommy's 18th birthday. He raised the glass toward the family portrait above the mantel. "Don't worry, son," he said quietly. "Daddy's going to make this right." Outside, Marcus's van disappeared into the darkness, carrying 2 people toward a reckoning 20 years in the making. Bobby Hutchinson had built his empire by being smarter and more ruthless than everyone else. Now Derek and Linda were going to learn why his enemies didn't stay enemies for long. Chapter 4. The Reckoning Begins. Bobby spent the night at the hospital, holding Tommy's hand and planning. By dawn, he had made 17 phone calls to contacts across 3 states, each conversation brief and coded. Old favors were being called in, debts were being collected, and a network of loyal associates was mobilizing. Dr. Reeves found him in the family lounge, staring out at the parking lot where Tommy's motorcycle had been loaded onto a police trailer the day before. "Mr. Hutchinson, I wanted to update you on Tommy's condition." Bobby turned, hope and dread warring in his chest. "Any change?" "Actually, yes. The swelling in his brain has decreased slightly. It's still too early to be optimistic, but his responses to stimuli are improving." Dr. Reeves managed a cautious smile. "He's young and strong. Don't give up hope yet." For the first time in 36 hours, Bobby felt something other than rage. Tommy was fighting. His son was a survivor, just like his old man. "Can I see him?" "Of course." "And Mr. Hutchinson, I noticed your wife hasn't been by yet. Is everything all right at home?" Bobby's expression darkened. Linda had some business to take care of out of town. Emergency trip. In Tommy's room, Bobby studied his son's face for any sign of the improvement Dr. Reeves had mentioned. Tommy looked the same, pale, still attached to machines, but somehow Bobby could sense a difference. A strength that hadn't been there before. "Your mom won't be coming by anymore," Bobby said quietly, adjusting Tommy's blankets. "She made some choices that can't be undone. But don't worry about that now. You just focus on getting better." Bobby's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Packages secured. Awaiting instructions." The warehouse Marcus referenced was officially owned by a shell company that existed only on paper. Located in an industrial district 20 miles from town, it had been designed for storing equipment, but had been modified over the years for more specialized purposes. Soundproof walls, multiple exit routes, and no security cameras for miles in any direction. Bobby had used it twice before, once for a city inspector who demanded a $50,000 bribe, and once for a rival contractor who'd been sabotaging Bobby's projects. Both situations had been resolved permanently and quietly. But this was different. This was personal. Bobby squeezed Tommy's hand one more time and headed for the door. He had work to do. The warehouse sat at the end of a gravel road that wound through abandoned industrial buildings. Bobby's truck kicked up dust clouds as he approached, the morning sun casting long shadows across the empty landscape. Marcus's van was parked beside the loading dock, along with 2 other vehicles Bobby recognized. Inside, the warehouse had been divided into sections. The main floor housed legitimate construction equipment, but the back section had been converted into something more specialized. Soundproof rooms, reinforced doors, and facilities for extended stays. Marcus met Bobby at the entrance to the special section. "They're in room 3. Been asking for lawyers, making threats, the usual. Any problems bringing them in?" Manning had a backup piece strapped to his ankle. Took it off him. Linda fought like a wildcat, but she's secured now. Marcus handed Bobby a small digital recorder. "Thought you might want this for whatever comes next." Bobby pocketed the device and walked toward room 3. Through a small window, he could see Derek and Linda sitting in metal chairs, their hands zip-tied behind their backs. Linda was still crying. Derek was staring at the wall with cold fury. Bobby entered the room, followed by Marcus. Derek looked up with undisguised hatred. "This is kidnapping, Hutchinson. False imprisonment. You're looking at 20 years minimum." "Am I?" Bobby pulled up a third chair and sat down facing them. "Because according to Detective Morrison, You and Linda fled town after learning about the brake line investigation. Guilty parties running from justice. Very suspicious behavior. Linda looked up sharply. You told the police we ran? I told them the truth. That when I confronted you about the insurance policy and Derek's criminal background, you both disappeared. Bobby turned on the digital recorder and placed it on a nearby table. Now I need you to tell me the rest of the truth. Starting with when you first decided my son was worth more dead than alive. Derek leaned back in his chair. You want a confession? Here's your confession. Your son was a naive boy who stuck his nose where it didn't belong. Your wife was a lonely woman married to a man who cared more about concrete and steel than human relationships. I simply provided what you couldn't. And what was that? Attention, affection, a future that didn't involve being married to a glorified construction worker for the rest of her life. Bobby felt Marcus tense behind him, but he kept his own voice level. So you convinced her to kill Tommy. I convinced her that sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the greater good. Derek's smile was cold. Linda understood that Tommy's inheritance would be tied up in trusts and legal complications for years. But insurance money? That's clean, immediate, and completely untraceable once it's been properly laundered. Linda was sobbing harder now. Derek said it would look like an accident, that Tommy wouldn't suffer, that we could use the money to start over somewhere beautiful, somewhere we could be happy. And you believed him? I loved him. Linda screamed. Do you understand that? I actually loved someone who loved me back. You never loved me, Bobby. You loved having me. You loved showing me off like another one of your possessions. But Derek saw me as a person. Bobby studied his wife's face, searching for any trace of the woman he'd married 20 years ago. When did you stop loving Tommy? The question seemed to hit Linda like a physical blow. I never stopped loving him. But Derek explained that Tommy would never really be happy anyway. He was too sensitive for this world, too gentle. Derek said it would be kinder to murder him for money, to let him go peacefully before life could break him the way it breaks everyone else. Linda's voice dropped to a whisper. Derek said Tommy would thank us if he could understand. Bobby turned to Derek. And what about the other families in Portland, Seattle, Phoenix? Did they thank you too? Derek's composure finally cracked completely. Those situations were business. Cold, clean business arrangements between consenting adults. This is different. Different how? Because I actually care about Linda. The others were just marks, just means to an end. But Linda and I have something real. Derek leaned forward as much as his restraints allowed. You want to know the truth, Hutchinson? Your wife came to me. She approached me, seduced me, convinced me to help her. I was just going to take the business money and move on, but she made me a better offer. Bobby looked at Linda, who was shaking her head frantically. That's not true. Derek, tell him that's not true. She'd been researching ways to kill Tommy for months before I ever suggested the insurance angle. Derek continued. She'd looked into accidental drowning, food poisoning, even hiring professionals. I just provided a cleaner method. Derek, stop. Linda was hyperventilating now. Please stop talking. But Derek was in full confessional mode, perhaps hoping to shift blame or buy himself mercy. She showed me Tommy's room, pointed out all the ways she could make it look like suicide. Said the insurance money would be cleaner than dealing with inheritance lawyers. Said Tommy was getting suspicious anyway, that he'd been asking questions about her business trips. Bobby felt something fundamental shift inside him. Linda hadn't been seduced by Derek. She'd been planning Tommy's murder independently and recruited Derek to help execute it. How long? Bobby asked quietly. How long what? How long had you been planning to kill our son? Linda looked up at him with tear-streaked mascara, and for just a moment, Bobby saw something that chilled him to the bone. Relief. Relief that she didn't have to pretend anymore. Since his 16th birthday, she whispered. When I realized the insurance policies I'd been building would mature when he turned 18. When I understood that he was going to college and wouldn't need me anymore, wouldn't be my baby anymore. When I calculated that $2 million could buy me freedom from this life, from this marriage, from being Bobby Hutchinson's trophy wife. The room fell silent except for the hum of the warehouse's ventilation system. Bobby stared at the woman who'd shared his bed for 20 years, who'd held their newborn son, who'd posed for thousands of family photos with love and tenderness that had apparently been completely fake. "You've been planning to murder Tommy for almost 2 years. I've been planning to set him free," Linda corrected, "and to set myself free in the process." Bobby stood up slowly, his legs feeling unsteady. Behind him, Marcus cleared his throat. "Boss, what are your instructions?" Bobby looked down at Derek and Linda, two people who'd spent months planning to murder his son, who'd sabotaged Tommy's motorcycle and left him to die on a lonely country road, who'd been prepared to cash insurance checks while Bobby grieved over their child's grave. "Give me some time to think," Bobby said finally. "Keep them comfortable. Keep them fed. But don't let them communicate with anyone." "Understood." As Bobby walked toward the door, Derek called after him. "Hutchinson, you can't keep us here forever. Eventually, someone's going to come looking." Bobby paused at the threshold. "Who's going to look for you, Derek? Your criminal associates who you were planning to double-cross? The police you've been running from for years? Or maybe Linda's friends from the country club will organize a search party?" He turned back to face them both. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to take some time to decide exactly how to handle this situation. In the meantime, you're going to stay here and think about what you've done. Think about Tommy lying in that hospital bed. Think about the fact that your greed and selfishness almost killed an innocent boy." "And then what?" Linda asked. Bobby's smile was colder than anything Derek had ever managed. "Then you're going to pay for what you've done. Both of you. In ways that will make you wish you'd never been born." He walked out, leaving them alone with Marcus and the weight of their confession. Outside, Bobby breathed deeply, trying to clear his head. Tommy was improving. His son was going to survive, was going to have a chance at the life Derek and Linda had tried to steal from him. But justice was still pending. And Bobby Hutchinson had never been patient when it came to collecting debts. Chapter 5. The Trap Closes. 3 days later, Tommy opened his eyes. Bobby was dozing in the bedside chair when he heard the change in his son's breathing. Tommy's eyes were unfocused at first, struggling against the harsh hospital lighting, but they found Bobby's face and held. "Dad!" Tommy's voice was barely a whisper, his throat raw from the breathing tube that had been removed that morning. "I'm here, son." Bobby gripped Tommy's hand, feeling tears he hadn't allowed himself to shed for 72 hours. "I'm right here. My bike. There was something wrong with the brakes." "I know. We'll talk about that later. Right now, you just need to rest and get better." Tommy's eyes darted around the room. "Where's Mom?" Bobby had dreaded this question. "She's not here, Tommy. She won't be coming. Is she sick? Did something happen to her?" "Something happened, but not what you think." Bobby squeezed his son's hand gently. "Tommy, I found your hiding place at the lake house. I found all the photos, all the research." Tommy's eyes widened, and Bobby could see the memories flooding back. "Derek, he saw me taking pictures. He chased me, but I got away. I went home to warn Mom, but she wasn't there. I was going to wait for you, but I got scared and decided to ride to the police station instead. That's when the brakes failed. They were fine when I left the house. Perfect. I checked them myself that morning because the bike had been making weird noises." Tommy struggled to sit up. "Dad, Derek did something to them. He tried to kill me." "I know. And your mother knew too." The color drained from Tommy's face. "What do you mean?" Bobby had hoped to ease into this conversation, but Tommy deserved the truth. "Your mother and Derek planned it together, son. They took out life insurance on you and arranged the accident to collect the money." Tommy stared at his father in disbelief. "That's impossible. Mom loves me. She would never." "I have their confessions, Tommy. Recorded confessions where they admitted everything." Bobby's voice was gentle but firm. "Your mother has been planning this for almost 2 years." Tommy turned his face toward the wall, tears streaming down his cheeks. Bobby felt his heart break watching his son process the ultimate betrayal. How do you explain to a 17-year-old that his mother wanted him dead for money? "Where are they now?" Tommy asked finally. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't hurt anyone else." Tommy looked back at his father, and Bobby saw something new in his son's eyes. Something harder than had been there before the accident. "What are you going to do to them?" Bobby studied his son's face carefully. Tommy had always been idealistic, believing in justice and forgiveness. But having your own mother try to murder you for insurance money had a way of changing a person's perspective on such things. What do you think I should do? I think, Tommy said slowly, that they tried to kill me for money. I think Mom stopped being my mother the moment she decided I was worth more dead than alive. And I think Derek is a predator who's probably done this before. He has, at least 3 other times in 3 other cities. Tommy nodded grimly. Then I think you should make sure they never get the chance to hurt anyone else ever again. Bobby felt a surge of dark pride. His son was going to be all right. Changed, hardened, but all right. The police are looking for them, Bobby said carefully. They think Derek and your mother fled town when they learned about the brake line investigation. But they didn't flee. No, they didn't. Tommy was quiet for a long time, staring at the ceiling. Dad, when I get out of here, I want to help. Whatever you're planning, I want to be part of it. Tommy, they tried to kill me. My own mother tried to murder me for money. Tommy's voice was getting stronger, filled with a resolve Bobby had never heard before. I deserve to be part of whatever happens next. Bobby squeezed his son's hand. All right, but first you get better. Then we'll talk about justice. Over the next week, as Tommy's condition improved rapidly, Bobby finalized his plans. The warehouse had become a temporary prison, with Derek and Linda being held in separate rooms under Marcus's careful supervision. They were being fed, given medical attention, and kept comfortable, but they were also being slowly broken down through isolation and psychological pressure. Derek was cracking first, used to controlling situations through charm and manipulation. He was struggling with his complete powerlessness. He'd gone from demanding lawyers to offering information about his previous crimes in exchange for better treatment. Linda was holding up better, but Bobby knew her breaking point was coming. She'd always been dependent on others for her sense of identity. First on Bobby for financial security, then on Derek for emotional validation. Cut off from both sources, she was starting to unravel. But Bobby wasn't ready for them to break yet. He needed them functional for what came next. Boss, Marcus said as Bobby arrived at the warehouse on Friday morning. We've got a complication. What kind of complication? Linda's been asking about Tommy. Wants to know if he's alive, if he's going to recover. Derek's been telling her the kid's probably dead, that they succeeded even if they got caught. Bobby frowned. And she's starting to crack. Really crack. Last night she was screaming that she never wanted Tommy to die, that Derek forced her into it. This morning she's asking to write him a letter, begging to see him one more time. Buyer's remorse. Seems like it. Question is, do we want to let her think the kid's dead, or do we want her to know he survived? Bobby considered the options. Linda believing Tommy was dead would torment her with guilt. But Linda knowing Tommy was alive and improving would torment her with the knowledge that she'd failed to murder her own son and would face his judgment when this was over. Let her know he's alive. Let her know he's getting better every day. And let her know he's seen the evidence of what she tried to do. Marcus nodded. Copy that. What about Derek? Derek's a different problem. He's not going to break from guilt because he doesn't feel any. He's going to break from fear. Bobby smiled coldly. It's time to introduce him to some of his old associates. You found them. I found them. And they're very interested in having a conversation with Derek about some money that went missing in Phoenix. That afternoon, Bobby made a series of phone calls that would have impressed the FBI's organized crime unit. Within hours, 3 very unpleasant men were driving toward the warehouse in a black SUV with Arizona plates. Vincent, Vinny, Torino, and his associates had been looking for Derek Manning for 8 months. Derek had skipped town with $200,000 that belonged to some very serious people. Money that was supposed to fund Derek's next operation, but had instead been used to finance his move to Bobby's town. Vinny was the kind of man who collected debts with a crowbar and considered himself an artist in the field of creative interrogation. He and Derek had unfinished business that went well beyond money. As the sun set over the warehouse district, Bobby stood in the parking lot watching Vinny's SUV approach. Inside the warehouse, Derek Manning was about to learn that betraying Bobby Hutchinson was only the second worst mistake he'd made recently. The worst mistake had been thinking he could skip town without paying his debts to Vincent Torino. Bobby checked his watch. Tommy was being discharged from the hospital tomorrow morning. By then, Derek would understand exactly how serious his situation had become, and Linda would be ready for the conversation that would determine how the rest of her very short life would play out. Justice was coming, and Bobby Hutchinson was going to make sure it was thorough, complete, and absolutely final. Chapter 6. The Breaking Point. Bobby brought Tommy home from the hospital on a gray October morning that felt like the end of something. His son moved carefully, still healing from his injuries, but there was a new hardness in his eyes that made him look older than his 17 years. "How long have they been here?" Tommy asked as Bobby pulled through the estate gates. 6 days. "And they don't know I'm alive?" "They know now. I made sure Linda found out yesterday." Tommy nodded grimly. The boy who'd left for his motorcycle ride a week ago had believed in fairness, justice, and his mother's love. The young man sitting beside Bobby now understood that some betrayals couldn't be forgiven and some people didn't deserve second chances. They spent the afternoon going through Tommy's evidence together, with Bobby explaining how each piece fit into the larger picture. Tommy absorbed it all with clinical detachment, asking questions about Derek's previous crimes and Linda's financial motivations with the same tone he might use to discuss a school assignment. "When do I get to see them?" Tommy asked as they finished reviewing the insurance documents. "Tonight. But first, there's something you need to understand about what's been happening at the warehouse." Bobby explained about Vincent Torino and his associates, about Derek's mounting terror as his past caught up with him, about Linda's psychological deterioration as she faced the reality of what she'd done. "Derek's been telling Linda that you're dead," Bobby continued, "that even though they got caught, they succeeded in killing you. When she finds out you're alive and here, it's going to destroy whatever's left of her sanity." Tommy considered this. Good. She deserves to be destroyed. At 8 p.m., Bobby and Tommy drove to the warehouse. Marcus met them at the entrance, his expression grim. "Derek's in bad shape," Marcus reported. "Vinny's boys worked him over pretty good this afternoon. Nothing permanent, but he's scared out his mind. Linda's worse. She's been talking to herself, asking God to forgive her, begging for Tommy to haunt her dreams." "Let's start with Derek," Bobby decided. They found Derek Manning zip-tied to a metal chair in room 2, his face a patchwork of bruises and his expensive clothes torn. When he saw Bobby enter, followed by Tommy, Derek's eyes went wide with shock and terror. "No," Derek whispered. "You're supposed to be dead. The brakes failed. You crashed." Tommy limped closer, his face expressionless. "I survived. Sorry to disappoint you. This is impossible. The bike was totaled, the tree. You didn't cut the brake lines deep enough," Tommy said calmly. "They failed on a straight stretch instead of a curve. I managed to lay the bike down instead of hitting the tree head-on." Derek stared at Tommy as if seeing a ghost. "But Vinny said," Linda's been believing what you told her," Bobby interjected. "That you'd succeeded in murdering my son. Imagine how she's going to feel when she finds out you failed." Derek began hyperventilating. It was one thing to face Bobby's wrath or even Vinny Torino's violent debt collection, but having his victim alive, standing in front of him, making it impossible to maintain any psychological distance from his crime, that was breaking him. "I want you to understand something," Tommy said, his voice carrying an eerie calm. "I spent 3 days in a coma because you and my mother decided I was worth more dead than alive. 3 days where the doctors weren't sure I'd ever wake up." Derek was shaking now. "Tommy, you have to understand, it wasn't personal. It was just business, just business." Tommy's voice finally carried some emotion, cold fury. "You tried to murder me for insurance money. You convinced my mother to betray her own son. You destroyed my family for $2 million. Your mother approached me. She's the one who wanted you dead." The slap came so fast Derek didn't see it coming. Tommy's hand connected with Derek's injured face, sending fresh blood spattering across the concrete floor. "Don't you ever talk about my mother that way," Tommy said quietly. "Yes, she betrayed me. Yes, she wanted me dead. But you're the predator who made it possible. You're the one who showed her how to turn murder into profit." Bobby watched his son with a mixture of pride and concern. Tommy was handling this better than expected, but there was something different about him now. Something that worried Bobby, even as it impressed him. "What do you want from me?" Derek asked through swollen lips. "I want you to understand what you've cost me," Tommy replied. "My mother's love. my trust in family, my belief that people are fundamentally good. You took all of that away when you decided to use me as a payday. Tommy turned to Bobby. I'm ready to see her now. Linda was in room 3, pacing frantically in the small space. When the door opened and she saw Tommy walking in behind Bobby, she collapsed her knees. Tommy, she screamed. Oh God, Tommy, you're alive. She tried to rush toward him, but her zip-tied hands threw off her balance, and she fell forward. Tommy made no move to help her up. Hello, Mother. Linda struggled to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Baby, are you okay? Are you hurt? They told me you were dead. They said the accident. The accident you planned, Tommy said quietly. The murder you arranged with Derek. Linda's face crumpled. No, baby, no. You don't understand. Derek said it would be quick, that you wouldn't suffer. He promised me you wouldn't feel any pain. I felt plenty of pain, Mother. Physical pain when the bike crashed. Emotional pain when I realized my own mother wanted me dead. And the pain I'm feeling right now, looking at you and remembering all the times you hugged me and told me you loved me while planning to murder me for money. I do love you, Linda sobbed. I've always loved you. But Derek explained that you'd never really be happy, that the world would break you eventually, that it would be kinder to murder me for $2 million. Linda stared at her son, seeing the change in him, the hardness that hadn't been there before. What have I done? She whispered. Oh God, what have I done to you? You tried to murder me, Tommy said simply. You spent 2 years planning to kill your own son for insurance money. You recruited a criminal to help you. You sabotaged my motorcycle and left me to die on a country road. I never wanted you to suffer, but you wanted me dead. Linda couldn't answer. The truth was too ugly to voice, too horrible to acknowledge. Tommy turned to Bobby. I'm done here. I've seen enough. As they walked toward the door, Linda called after them desperately. Tommy, please, give me a chance to explain. Give me a chance to make this right. Tommy paused at the threshold. There's nothing to explain, Mother, and there's no way to make this right. You chose money over your son's life. Now you get to live with the consequences of that choice. What consequences? Linda asked, terror creeping into her voice. Tommy looked back at her with eyes that seemed far older than 17. You'll find out. Outside the room, Bobby put his hand on Tommy's shoulder. You did well in there. I don't feel good about it, Tommy admitted. I feel empty. Like something inside me died in that hospital room and isn't coming back. That's normal, son. Some betrayals change you permanently. Tommy nodded. What happens now? Bobby checked his watch. Now we let them think about what they've learned. Tomorrow, we start the final phase, which is... Bobby's smile was colder than anything Derek Manning had ever managed. Justice. Complete, final, and absolutely permanent. As they drove away from the warehouse, Tommy stared out at the darkness. Dad, when this is over, I want to leave town. Go to college somewhere far away. Start over where nobody knows what happened. We'll make that happen, Bobby promised. But first, we finish what Derek and your mother started. Tommy nodded. The boy who believed in fairness and second chances was gone forever. In his place sat a young man who understood that some people didn't deserve mercy, some crimes couldn't be forgiven, and some debts could only be paid in blood. Derek and Linda had created their own monster when they tried to murder Bobby Hutchinson's son. Now, they were going to meet him face to face. Chapter 7, Justice Served. The next evening, Bobby gathered everyone at the warehouse for what he privately called the final performance. Vinnie Torino and his associates were present, having been promised that Derek would soon be available for permanent debt collection. Marcus and his crew stood by, ready to handle whatever cleanup would be necessary. But the stars of this particular show were Derek and Linda, both of whom had been moved to the main floor and secured to chairs facing each other. For the first time since their capture, they could see each other's condition, Derek's battered face and Linda's hollow-eyed desperation. Tommy sat in a third chair, positioned between them like a judge. He'd insisted on being present for this, and Bobby had agreed. His son deserved to see justice done. Before we begin, Bobby announced, I want both of you to understand exactly where we are in this process. Derek, Vinnie Torino has legal claim to your life. You stole his money, skipped town, and left him holding the bag for a deal that went bad. Normally, I just hand you over and walk away. Derek's eyes darted toward Vinny, who smiled back with the warmth of a shark scenting blood. But this isn't just about money, Bobby continued. This is about justice for my son and consequences for both of you. He pulled out a thick folder and set it on a table where both of them could see it. This contains complete documentation of your crimes. Derek's previous fraud operations in 3 cities. Linda's financial planning for Tommy's murder. Your communications about the insurance policy. Your meeting with the men who helped sabotage Tommy's motorcycle. Linda went pale. What communications? We were careful. You were careful about phone calls. But Derek kept souvenirs. Bobby pulled out a series of printed emails. Love letters detailing your plans. Financial projections showing how you'd split the insurance money. Even a timeline for Tommy's murder that Derek titled Project Freedom. Derek stared at the emails in horror. Those were private. You had no right. I had every right to investigate my son's attempted murder, Bobby snapped. Just like the FBI will have every right to use these as evidence when they find your bodies. The word bodies hung in the air like a death sentence. Linda began crying again, but Derek straightened up with desperate defiance. You can't murder us in cold blood, Hutchinson. You're not that kind of man. You're right, Bobby agreed. I'm not going to murder you in cold blood. Relief flickered across Derek's face, quickly replaced by confusion as Bobby continued. I'm going to give you the same chance you gave my son. I'm going to arrange an accident. Bobby nodded to Marcus, who wheeled in a large metal tank connected to various tubes and gauges. Propane, Bobby explained conversationally. Highly flammable, but also heavier than air. When it leaks, it settles in low places and builds up until something ignites it. Gas explosion, Vinny said approvingly. Classic industrial accident. Happens all the time in places like this. The beauty is that the explosion will destroy most evidence of what happened here, Bobby continued. Your bodies will be found in the wreckage, but the cause of death will be listed as accidental. Just like Tommy's accident was supposed to look. Linda was hyperventilating now. Bobby, please. I know I made mistakes, but you can't do this. I'm your wife. You stopped being my wife when you decided to murder our son. Bobby's voice was ice cold. You became a stranger who tried to destroy my family for money. Tommy spoke for the first time. How long do we have before the explosion? Bobby checked his watch. The timer's set for 15 minutes. Enough time for final words, but not enough for any miraculous escapes. Derek tested his restraints frantically. This is insane. You're going to kill us for money that was never even real. The money was real enough for you to cut brake lines, Tommy replied calmly. Real enough for you to plan my murder. But I didn't go through with it. Only because you got caught. Tommy leaned forward slightly. Derek, if I hadn't discovered your meetings, if I hadn't found the insurance policy, if I hadn't started taking pictures, you would have murdered me and moved on to the next town. Derek couldn't deny it. The truth was written all over his face. Linda tried a different approach. Tommy, baby, I know you're angry, but you're better than this. You don't want to become a killer. Don't let your father turn you into something you'll regret. Tommy stared at his mother with eyes that held no warmth, no recognition, no love. You're right, Mother. I don't want to become a killer. That's why I'm not going to pull any triggers or light any fuses. Then stop this. I'm not stopping anything. I'm just watching justice happen to people who try to murder me for money. Tommy's voice carried a finality that chilled everyone in the room. You made your choices. Now live with the consequences. Bobby felt a complex mix of emotions watching his son. Tommy had been irreversibly changed by this experience, hardened in ways that would probably affect him for the rest of his life. But he was also displaying a strength and moral clarity that Bobby found impressive. 5 minutes, Marcus announced. Derek was pulling against his restraints hard enough to draw blood. Hutchinson, you win, okay? We'll confess everything. We'll plead guilty. We'll take whatever sentence the courts give us. The courts? Bobby laughed harshly. Derek, you're wanted in 3 states for fraud and murder. Vinny here has a contract on your life. And my son has permanent brain damage from the accident you caused. Do you really think the courts are going to provide adequate justice? Your son looks fine to me. Tommy touched the scar on his forehead where surgeons had relieved pressure on his brain. The doctors say I'll have seizures for the rest of my life. Possible memory problems. Coordination issues. All because you wanted insurance money. 2 minutes, Marcus called. Linda was praying now, begging God for forgiveness, promising to change if she survived. Derek had given up on his restraints and was offering Bobby everything he could think of: money, information about other criminals, sexual favors from Linda, anything to buy more time. Bobby watched them both with detached interest. In a few minutes, the people who tried to murder his son would be dead, and justice would be served. But he felt no satisfaction, no sense of completion, just cold efficiency and the knowledge that a necessary job was being finished. 30 seconds, Marcus announced. Tommy, Linda screamed. Please, I'm your mother. I gave birth to you. I raised you. That has to count for something. Tommy looked at her one final time. You stopped being my mother when you decided I was worth more dead than alive. Now you're just a stranger who tried to murder me for money. 10 seconds, Marcus called. Derek was cursing now, screaming threats about what his associates would do to Bobby's family. Linda was praying and crying and begging. Neither of them looked like the confident conspirators who'd planned Tommy's murder. They looked like what they'd always been: selfish, weak people who'd been willing to murder a child for money. Time, Marcus announced. But instead of an explosion, the warehouse filled with the sound of police sirens. Bobby smiled as Detective Morrison and a dozen officers poured through the doors, weapons drawn. Gentlemen, you're just in time. Derek and Linda stared in shock as their restraints were cut, and they were immediately resecured with handcuffs. Morrison looked around the warehouse, taking in the propane tank, which Bobby had never actually armed, the recording equipment, and the pile of evidence. Everything's been recorded? Morrison asked. Every word, Bobby confirmed, handing over multiple digital devices. Confessions to Tommy's attempted murder, details about Derek's previous crimes, financial records showing the insurance fraud. Everything you need for airtight convictions. Tommy stood up slowly, favoring his injured leg. They actually believed you were going to kill them with a gas explosion? People facing death will believe anything, Bobby replied. Even people who were planning to murder children for money. As Derek and Linda were led away in handcuffs, Derek managed one final outburst. You can't prove anything. Those confessions were coerced. Detective Morrison smiled grimly. Confessions given under duress to prevent imminent death? Yeah, those hold up in court just fine, especially when they're corroborated by physical evidence, financial records, and witness testimony. Linda said nothing as she was loaded into a police van. She just stared at Tommy with hollow eyes, perhaps finally understanding that she destroyed not just her son's trust, but her own life as well. What happens now? Tommy asked as the police cars disappeared into the darkness. Now they go to prison for the rest of their lives, Bobby replied. Derek's looking at charges in 4 states, plus whatever Vinny's friends decide to do to him in prison. Linda's looking at conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and accessory to attempted murder. Tommy nodded. And us? We rebuild. We move forward. We make sure this never happens again. As they walked toward Bobby's truck, Tommy asked the question that had been haunting him. Dad, are you proud of who I've become through this? Bobby stopped and looked at his son, really looked at him. Tommy had been forced to grow up in the worst possible way, had learned that evil could wear a loving face, had discovered that some betrayals were unforgivable. But he'd also shown strength, wisdom, and a moral clarity that impressed Bobby. I'm proud that you survived, Bobby said finally. I'm proud that you fought back. And I'm proud that when you had the chance for revenge, you chose justice instead. Tommy smiled for the first time in weeks. I learned from the best. As they drove away from the warehouse, Bobby reflected on everything that had happened. Derek and Linda would spend the rest of their lives paying for their crimes. Tommy would carry scars from this experience forever, but he'd also proven he was strong enough to survive anything. And Bobby had learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is ensuring that those who threaten your family never get the chance to threaten anyone else. Justice had been served. The family had been protected. And Bobby Hutchinson's reputation for never forgetting those who crossed him had been reinforced once again. Some debts could only be paid in full. Chapter 8. The aftermath. 6 months later, Tommy graduated from high school as valedictorian, his acceptance letter to MIT tucked safely in his desk drawer. The seizures had been mild and manageable. The coordination issues had resolved with physical therapy, and the memory problems had turned out to be a blessing. He could forget the sound of his mother's voice confessing to planning his murder. Derek Manning had been sentenced to life without parole after pleading guilty to attempted murder, fraud, and racketeering charges in 4 states. 3 weeks into his sentence at a maximum security facility in Arizona, he'd been found dead in his cell. The official cause was suicide, but Vinnie Torino's associates had been known to be creative in their debt collection methods. Linda Hutchinson had been sentenced to 25 years for conspiracy to commit murder and insurance fraud. She'd aged a decade in the 6 months since her arrest. Her perfect blonde hair, now gray at the roots, her designer wardrobe replaced with prison orange. She'd written letters to Tommy begging for forgiveness, but he'd returned them unopened. Bobby stood in the empty master bedroom, packing the last of Linda's belongings into boxes marked for donation. He'd already removed her photos from the walls, cleared her cosmetics from the bathroom, and sorted through 20 years of accumulated marriage. Most of it was going to charity. He wanted nothing in his house that reminded him of the woman who'd tried to murder his son. Dad! Tommy appeared in the doorway. The real estate agent is here. Bobby nodded. They were selling the estate and moving to Boston, where Tommy would attend MIT and Bobby would establish the East Coast office of Hutchinson Construction he'd been considering for years. Fresh start, new city, no memories of brake lines and insurance policies. The real estate agent was an efficient woman in her 40s who'd been appropriately sympathetic about Bobby's tragic divorce without asking uncomfortable questions. She walked through the house taking notes, commenting on the custom craftsmanship and premium finishes that would make it attractive to upscale buyers. The only challenge will be the recent notoriety, she admitted as they finished the tour. The Linda Hutchinson case was all over the news. Some buyers might be put off by the association. Lower the price accordingly, Bobby said. I want it sold quickly. As the agent left, Bobby found Tommy in his room, packing books and photography equipment. The boy had grown 3 inches since the accident, filling out with muscle from months of physical therapy. At 18, he looked more like Bobby than ever. Same hard jaw, same calculating eyes, same ability to remain calm under pressure. Any regrets about leaving? Bobby asked. Tommy looked around his childhood bedroom, taking in the trophies and photos and memories of a more innocent time. None at all. This place is contaminated now. Strong word. Accurate word. Tommy sealed another box. Every room in this house has memories of her. Her reading me bedtime stories while planning my murder. Her making breakfast while calculating insurance payouts. Her hugging me goodbye while knowing she'd arranged for me never to come home. Bobby understood. He'd had the same thoughts walking through rooms where Linda had smiled and laughed and played the role of loving wife and mother while secretly planning to destroy their family. MIT will be good for you, Bobby said. New environment, intellectual challenges, people who don't know your history. What about you? Will you be okay starting over at 45? Bobby smiled. Son, I started over with nothing at 25. At 45, I've got experience, capital, and connections. Plus, I'll have the satisfaction of knowing the people who tried to destroy us are exactly where they belong. They finished packing in comfortable silence, 2 survivors preparing to move beyond the wreckage of betrayal. As the sun set over the estate Bobby had built with his own hands, he felt no nostalgia for what he was leaving behind. This house had been built on love and trust that had turned out to be illusions. The new house in Boston would be built on truth and the unbreakable bond between a father and son who'd survived the ultimate test together. Dad, Tommy said as they loaded the last boxes into the truck. I want you to know that what happened didn't just take away my mother. It gave me something too. What's that? Certainty. About who you are, about what matters, about how far you'll go to protect the people you love. Tommy looked directly at Bobby. I never have to wonder if you'd betray me for money or convenience or personal gain. I know you wouldn't. Bobby felt his throat tighten. You never had to wonder about that, son. I know that now. But before this happened, it was just faith. Now it's knowledge based on evidence. Tommy smiled grimly. She tried to destroy our family, but she ended up proving that the part of our family that matters is unbreakable. As they drove away from the estate, Bobby thought about the journey that had brought them to this point. Linda and Derek had thought they were targeting easy victims, a successful businessman distracted by his work, and a naive teenager who wouldn't see danger coming. They'd been wrong on both counts. Bobby Hutchinson had built his empire by being smarter and more ruthless than everyone else. Tommy Hutchinson had inherited his father's intelligence and strength, along with his mother's beauty and charm, but none of her weakness or selfishness. Derek and Linda had thought they were destroying a family. Instead, they forged it into something stronger than steel. In Boston, Bobby would build an even more successful company. Tommy would earn his engineering degree and probably surpass his father's achievements. They would both find new relationships, new challenges, new sources of happiness. But they would never again be vulnerable to the kind of betrayal that had nearly destroyed them. They'd learned that some people couldn't be trusted, some relationships were built on lies, and some enemies needed to be eliminated permanently. Most importantly, they'd learned that blood meant nothing compared to loyalty, that family was defined by actions rather than genetics, and that the strongest bonds were forged in the fire of shared survival. Linda Hutchinson had given birth to Tommy, but she'd lost the right to call herself his mother when she'd chosen money over his life. Bobby Hutchinson had earned his son's loyalty and respect by proving he'd never make that choice. As they crossed the state line, leaving behind everything associated with their former life, Bobby felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with justice. Derek and Linda had received exactly what they deserved. Tommy had survived and grown stronger. Bobby had protected his family and eliminated the threats against them. The games were over. The war had been won, and the Hutchinson name would continue with honor in a new city, free from the contamination of betrayal and strengthened by the knowledge that they'd survived the worst that life could throw at them. Some battles ended with negotiated settlements. Others ended with total victory and the complete destruction of your enemies. This had been the second kind. Chapter 9, New Beginnings. 2 years later, Bobby stood on the roof of a half-finished skyscraper in downtown Boston, surveying the city that had become their new home. Hutchinson Construction East Coast had exceeded every projection, with contracts worth $50 million and a reputation for quality that had established them as the premier builder in the region. Tommy was in his sophomore year at MIT, studying engineering with a focus on structural design. He'd made Dean's List both semesters, joined the boxing team to work through his remaining anger, and started dating a brilliant chemistry student named Rachel who knew nothing about his past and didn't need to. Mr. Hutchinson, Bobby's new assistant, Janet, approached carefully. She'd learned that interrupting him during his rooftop thinking time required good reason. "You have a call from Detective Morrison." Bobby frowned. Morrison had kept in touch sporadically, updating them on legal developments, but it had been months since their last contact. He followed Janet to the construction trailer that served as their temporary office. "Morrison? What's the news?" "Bobby, I wanted to give you a heads up. Linda's been granted a medical compassionate release hearing. Her lawyers are claiming she's developed a severe psychiatric condition that requires specialized treatment." Bobby's jaw tightened. Meaning they want to transfer her to a minimum security psychiatric facility instead of prison. She'd still be confined, but the conditions would be much more comfortable. "What are her chances?" "Better than I'd like. She's been a model prisoner, no incidents, and the psychiatric evaluations support her claims of severe depression and anxiety. The judge might go for it." Bobby was quiet for a long moment. "When's the hearing?" "Next Tuesday. You and Tommy have the right to provide victim impact statements if you want to attend." After hanging up, Bobby stared out at the Boston skyline. Linda was trying to game the system one more time, looking for an easier way to serve her sentence. Even in prison, she was still scheming, still manipulating, still trying to avoid the full consequences of her actions. He called Tommy at MIT. His son listened without comment as Bobby explained the situation. "Do you want to go to the hearing?" Bobby asked. "Absolutely. She needs to understand that her victims are watching, that her crimes have permanent consequences. Tommy, you don't have to put yourself through that. Seeing her again. Dad, I need to see her. I need to look at the person who tried to murder me and make sure she understands that I survived everything she tried to do to me. The following Tuesday, Bobby and Tommy sat in a courtroom in Linda's current state, watching as his former wife was led in wearing shackles and a gray prison uniform. She'd lost 30 pounds and looked fragile, vulnerable, exactly the image her lawyers wanted to project. Linda's eyes found Bobby and Tommy in the gallery, and for a moment, her carefully constructed facade cracked. She'd probably hoped they wouldn't attend, that she could play the role of reformed victim without having to face the son she'd tried to murder. The psychiatric expert testified about Linda's deteriorating mental health, her remorse over her crimes, her potential for rehabilitation in a treatment facility. Linda herself took the stand, crying as she described her guilt and depression, her desperate desire to make amends for her terrible mistakes. She was good, Bobby admitted grudgingly. Convincing, sympathetic, genuinely fragile. If he hadn't known the truth about her, he might have believed the performance. When the prosecutor called Tommy to give his victim impact statement, the courtroom fell silent. At 20, Tommy had grown into a confident young man who commanded attention when he spoke. "Your Honor," Tommy began, "the defendant is my biological mother. She raised me, claimed to love me, and spent 2 years planning to murder me for insurance money." Linda flinched as if struck. She recruited a career criminal to help her. She researched methods of making my death look accidental. She took out a $2 million life insurance policy and calculated how to split the proceeds with her accomplice. Tommy's voice remained calm, factual, devastating. When I discovered evidence of their plan, the defendant and her accomplice attempted to murder me by sabotaging my motorcycle. I spent 3 days in a coma. I suffered permanent brain damage. I will have seizures for the rest of my life. The judge was listening intently, taking notes. But the physical damage isn't the worst part, Tommy continued. The worst part is learning that the woman who raised me, who I trusted completely, had been planning my death for 2 years. The worst part is knowing that every time she hugged me, every time she said she loved me, she was calculating how much money my death would be worth. Linda was crying harder now, but Tommy showed no sympathy. The defendant wants to serve her sentence in a comfortable psychiatric facility instead of prison. She wants sympathy for the depression and anxiety caused by being held accountable for trying to murder her own son. Tommy paused, letting that sink in. "Your Honor, I respectfully submit that the defendant's mental health problems are a direct result of her guilt over her crimes, not a reason to reduce her punishment. She chose to conspire to murder me. She chose to betray her family. She chose to value money over her son's life." Tommy looked directly at Linda. She made those choices when she was mentally competent and fully aware of the consequences. The fact that she now regrets those choices, the fact that living with the guilt is difficult for her, doesn't entitle her to a more comfortable prison cell. The courtroom was absolutely silent. I survived my mother's attempt to murder me. I rebuilt my life despite the permanent damage she caused. I've thrived in college and started building a career. I've proven that her efforts to destroy me failed completely. Tommy's voice hardened. Now I want to see her serve every day of the sentence she earned, in the prison she was assigned to, under the conditions that reflect the severity of her crimes, without special accommodations for the mental anguish caused by her guilt. Tommy returned to his seat without looking at Linda again. Bobby felt a surge of pride watching his son. The boy had become a man who understood that some people didn't deserve mercy, some crimes couldn't be mitigated by regret, and some consequences had to be faced in full. The judge deliberated for 30 minutes before denying Linda's request for transfer. She would serve her full sentence in maximum security, without the comfortable accommodations her lawyers had sought. As Linda was led away, she tried to catch Tommy's eye one more time. But Tommy was looking at his phone, checking messages from Rachel about their plans for the evening. Linda had become irrelevant to his life, a problem that had been solved and filed away. Outside the courthouse, Bobby and Tommy walked toward their rental car. "How do you feel?" Bobby asked. "Satisfied. She got exactly what she deserved. No more, no less." Tommy smiled, and I got to see that she's exactly where she belongs. Any regrets about coming? None. I needed to see her powerless, to confirm that she can't hurt us anymore. Tommy got into the passenger seat. She's going to spend the next 23 years in a small cell, thinking about what she lost when she chose money over family. As they drove toward the airport, Bobby reflected on how completely their roles had reversed. 2 years ago, he'd been the one consumed by rage and planning revenge. Now Tommy was the one with ice in his veins, calmly ensuring that justice was served. Linda had created her own nemesis when she tried to murder her son. Tommy would never forgive her, never show her mercy, never allow her to escape the full consequences of her betrayal. He would spend the rest of his life succeeding, thriving, and proving that her attempt to destroy him had failed completely. "Dad," Tommy said as their plane lifted off. "Thank you." "For what?" "For showing me that family isn't about blood. It's about loyalty. It's about people who would never betray you, no matter what." Bobby squeezed his son's shoulder. "We're all the family we need." "I know, and that's why we're going to win at everything we do for the rest of our lives." As Boston disappeared below them, Bobby thought about the future. Tommy would graduate from MIT with honors, probably start his own company, definitely surpass every achievement Bobby had managed. He'd marry Rachel or someone like her, have children who would grow up knowing that family meant unbreakable loyalty. Bobby would continue building his empire, secure in the knowledge that his son was strong enough to handle anything life threw at him. They would both find new sources of happiness, new challenges to conquer, new ways to prove that the people who tried to destroy them had only made them stronger. Linda would spend the next 2 decades in a cell, thinking about the family she'd betrayed and the life she'd thrown away for money. Derek was already dead, his debt to society paid in full. Justice had been served. The family had been protected. The enemies had been eliminated. And Bobby Hutchinson's legacy would continue through a son who understood that some people couldn't be trusted, some betrayals couldn't be forgiven, and some victories were worth whatever they cost. The war was over. They had won completely. Some stories ended with forgiveness and reconciliation. Others ended with justice and the total defeat of those who'd chosen to become enemies. This had been the second kind, and Bobby Hutchinson wouldn't have it any other way. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Chapter 1. Uninvited. Barrett Thorne stared at his phone, the text message from his ex-wife, Natalie, burning into his retinas. "Barrett, this isn't personal, but Max doesn't feel comfortable with you attending Zoe's birthday. It would be better if you skip this one. I'll send pictures." Barrett's jaw clenched as he read it again. His own daughter's 16th birthday party, and he was being told not to come because Natalie's new boyfriend didn't feel comfortable. He had never even met this Max person. He typed back, "She's my daughter. I'm coming." The reply was immediate. "Max is paying for everything at the Four Seasons. He says it's his event, his guest list. Please don't make this difficult." Barrett's spacious home office suddenly felt claustrophobic. The sleek, minimalist furniture that usually brought him peace now seemed to mock his powerlessness. Outside his floor-to-ceiling windows, Seattle's skyline glittered in the morning light, oblivious to his fury. His phone rang. Zoe's name flashed on the screen. "Dad." Her voice was small, uncertain. "Hey, sweetheart. I was just talking to your mom about your party." A pause. "She told you already? That I'm not invited?" "Yeah." Barrett kept his voice level, not wanting to put his daughter in the middle. "It's not me, Dad. Max says you'd make everyone uncomfortable. He says you'll embarrass me because..." She trailed off. "Because what, Zoe?" "Because you're not successful like him. He says it would be awkward having someone like you at the Four Seasons." The words tumbled out in a rush, as if she was repeating something she'd heard many times. The pain lanced through Barrett's chest. For 3 years since the divorce, he'd maintained the appearance of a struggling small business owner. It had been a deliberate choice, one that had apparently cost him his daughter's respect. "I see," he said quietly. And what do you think? Another pause. Mom says you never amounted to anything, that you wasted your potential. Barrett closed his eyes. Natalie knew nothing of his actual life. No one did, except his inner circle. I'm sorry, Dad, Zoe continued. Max bought me a car for my birthday. He says I shouldn't waste time with losers. And you believe that? I don't know what to believe anymore. Her voice cracked. I gotta go. Mom's calling me. The call ended. Barrett set down his phone and gazed at his reflection in the dark computer screen. At 42, he still cut an imposing figure, 6'2" with broad shoulders and the physique of someone who never missed his morning workouts. His dark hair was just beginning to gray at the temples, giving him what his business associates called a distinguished look. 3 years ago, when Natalie left him, taking 13-year-old Zoe with her, she thought she was leaving a failing businessman. She had no idea that Barrett's apparent struggles were a calculated move as he secretly built Thorne Innovations into a tech empire valued at over $2 billion. Only a select few knew that the modest Barrett Thorne Consulting was merely a front for his vast holdings. His real wealth and power remained hidden behind shell companies and discreet investments, a protective measure that had begun during their marriage when Barrett recognized Natalie's growing materialism. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Thorne, your 10 o'clock is here, announced his assistant. Barrett straightened his tie and pushed the hurt down deep where he kept all his old wounds. Send him in, Ava. A tall man with weather-beaten features entered. Lyle Garrison, Barrett's head of security and former Army Ranger, had been with him since the beginning. You look like hell, Lyle observed. Natalie's banned me from Zoe's birthday party. Her new boyfriend doesn't want failures like me embarrassing them at the Four Seasons. Lyle's expression darkened. That's cold. What are you going to do about it? Barrett stood and walked to the window. The Seattle skyline, where he owned 3 of the buildings visible from his office, sprawled before him. Nothing. Yet, he turned back to Lyle with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. But I think it's time I met this Max person. Chapter 2. Paper Masks. Barrett met Natalie Kingston during their junior year at Washington State University. He was studying business with big dreams. She was in communications with bigger ones. Their connection was instant. The ambitious business major and the vivacious future PR executive. You're different, she told him on their third date, as they shared cheap wine in his cramped apartment. Most guys talk about what they'll do someday. You talk like you're already doing it. That confidence had attracted her. So had his intensity, his work ethic, and the spark in his eyes when he discussed his ideas. What Barrett didn't know then was that Natalie was primarily attracted to potential, specifically the potential for wealth. They married 2 years after graduation. Barrett launched his first tech startup with his roommate Flynn Rivera, while Natalie landed a job at a prestigious PR firm. The early years were happy, 2 young professionals climbing their respective ladders, making a modest home in a Seattle suburb. Then came the dot-com crash. Barrett's first company folded, taking their savings with it. Natalie stood by him, but something shifted in her eyes. The admiration dimmed, replaced by a constant evaluation. Zoe's birth temporarily unified them. Barrett took odd consulting jobs while rebuilding in secret, creating the foundation of what would become Thorne Innovations. He worked brutal hours, often sleeping at a small office downtown rather than making the commute home. You're never here, Natalie would say. What kind of father are you becoming? I'm building something for us, he'd reply. For Zoe's future. What he didn't tell her was that his new business model was working incredibly well. By the time Zoe was 5, Barrett had silent ownership in 3 successful tech companies. By the time she was 10, that number had grown to 12, with a net worth approaching 9 figures. But he kept it hidden, disturbed by the changes he observed in Natalie. Her fascination with luxury brands. Her new friends, all wealthy wives with wealthy husbands. Her increasing dissatisfaction with their modest lifestyle. The Mendozas just bought a summer home in the Hamptons, she'd say over dinner. Or, Carol's husband took her to Paris for their anniversary. Barrett created a paper mask, the struggling consultant still trying to find his footing. He drove a 3-year-old Audi instead of the Bentley he could afford. Their house was comfortable, but not extravagant. He claimed business failures when he was actually orchestrating massive deals through proxies and shell companies. Then came the final straw. When Zoe was 13, Natalie came home from a charity gala she'd attended alone. "I met someone tonight," she announced, standing in their bedroom doorway while Barrett reviewed contracts. "His name is Maxwell Holloway. He owns Holloway Development Group." Barrett looked up, recognizing the name of a mid-sized property development company that specialized in high-end commercial real estate. "That's nice," he said, returning to his paperwork. "He asked me to dinner. I said yes." Barrett set down his pen. "You're married." "Am I?" Natalie laughed bitterly. "To what? A man who's never here? Who can't give his family the life they deserve? Who's going nowhere while all our friends succeed?" "I provide for us," Barrett said quietly. "You provide mediocrity," she snapped. "I'm tired of making excuses for you at parties. Tired of watching other women get the life I deserved." A month later, she moved out, taking Zoe. The divorce was brutal but quick. Barrett let her believe what she wanted about his finances, paying a reasonable but not extravagant settlement. Natalie walked away, thinking she'd escaped a failed husband, never realizing the fortune she'd left behind. Within 6 months, she was publicly dating Max Holloway. And within a year, Barrett had quietly acquired controlling interest in 3 companies that did essential business with Holloway Development Group. He never used this leverage. He simply held it, waiting, patient, calculating. Until now. Chapter 3, The Phantom Empire. "She actually called you a loser to your face?" Flynn Rivera's normally cheerful expression darkened as he paced Barrett's private office at Thorn Tower, the secret headquarters Barrett had built in downtown Seattle, concealed behind the modest facade of a shared workspace company he owned. "Not directly," Barrett replied, swirling the scotch in his glass. "But she's been filling Zoe's head with it for years." Flynn stopped pacing. At 41, he looked younger than Barrett, with his energetic movements and casual attire, a testament to his role as the public face of their technology ventures while Barrett operated from the shadows. "It's been 3 years, man. Maybe it's time to drop the disguise. At least with Zoe." Barrett stared out at the view from the 47th floor, his tower, his city. "I wanted to see who would stand by me when they thought I had nothing. And now you know," Flynn said softly. Barrett nodded, pain flashing across his features before the mask of control returned. "Now I know." His phone buzzed with a text from Ava. "Research on Maxwell Holloway complete. Files uploaded to your secure server." "Let's see what we're dealing with," Barrett murmured, opening his laptop. The file was comprehensive. Maxwell Holloway, 45, CEO of Holloway Development Group. Divorced twice before meeting Natalie. No children. Company valued at approximately $75 million. Substantial, but a fraction of Thorn Innovation's worth. Known for flashy developments, celebrity connections, and aggressive business tactics. Most importantly, Holloway Development Group was currently seeking financing for a major Seattle waterfront project, their biggest ever. And unknown to Holloway, the lending consortium they were negotiating with was controlled by one of Barrett's shell companies. "He's leveraged to his eyeballs," Flynn observed, reading over Barrett's shoulder. One failed project away from trouble. Barrett stared at a photo of Max, tall, tanned, with 2 perfect veneered teeth and the smug expression of a man who'd never faced real consequences. "And there's more," Flynn continued. "Holloway Development just put in a bid to acquire the Westlake Center property. Guess who owns the holding company that controls it?" Barrett smiled thinly. "That would be me. This guy has no idea he's been swimming in your pond." "No," Barrett said quietly. "He doesn't." His phone rang, Zoe again. Barrett put on speaker. "Dad." Her voice was hushed, as if she was hiding somewhere. "I'm sorry about earlier. Max and Mom were right there." "It's okay, sweetheart," Barrett said, softening his tone. "What's going on?" "Mom said I can at least video call you during the party on Saturday." She paused. "I want you there, Dad. I don't care what Max says." Barrett exchanged a glance with Flynn. "I want to be there too, Zoe. We'll figure something out." After they hung up, Flynn raised an eyebrow. "Video call, huh? That could be interesting." "Very interesting," Barrett agreed, his mind already racing. "Especially if Max happens to be in frame when I answer." Later that evening, Barrett sat in his home study reviewing the latest acquisition proposals when his secure line rang. It was Lyle. "Got something you should know," the security chief said without preamble. "Holloway's been asking questions about you around town." Barrett set down his pen. "What kind of questions?" "Basic background checks. Seems like he's trying to verify your loser status before the big party. Making sure you're as insignificant as Natalie claims." "Interesting timing," Barrett mused. "He's been dating my ex-wife for years, but only now decides to check me out?" "There's more," Lyle continued. "The reason is the Westlake deal. Your name came up peripherally in some paperwork, and he's suddenly paranoid about connections he can't explain." A slow smile spread across Barrett's face. "So Max doesn't want me at the party because he thinks I'm a nobody, but he's also worried I might be somebody." "Pretty much. What's your play here, boss?" Barrett leaned back in his chair, the plans crystallizing in his mind. "For 3 years I've been invisible, Lyle. I think it's time to step into the light. Selectively." The video call. "The perfect opportunity," Barrett agreed. "Give me everything on Holloway's current projects, especially the waterfront development. I want to know every investor, every contractor, every permit application." After hanging up, Barrett opened his safe and removed a file labeled contingency. Inside was a detailed strategy he'd created years ago, but never implemented. A systematic approach to revealing his true identity and status in ways that would maximize impact on specific targets. He developed it initially as a business tactic. Now, it would serve a more personal purpose. Barrett updated the file with notes about the upcoming birthday party and video call. Then he opened his laptop and typed an email to his attorneys, instructing them to prepare for significant business moves in the coming weeks. As Barrett worked late into the night, a text from Natalie arrived. "Please don't make a scene about the party. Max is very particular about his social circle. It will be embarrassing for everyone if you try to come." Barrett didn't reply. Instead, he pulled up the real estate record for Natalie and Max's current residence, a $3.2 million waterfront home on Mercer Island. Property taxes were coming due next month, he noted, and the mortgage holder was a bank that Barrett's investment group had recently acquired. Small details, useful details. The pieces were falling into place. Chapter 4. Hello, boss. Saturday arrived with Seattle's typical autumn drizzle. Barrett spent the morning in his home gym, working off the tension that had built over the past week. By noon, he was showered and dressed in a custom charcoal suit, a stark contrast to the casual attire he typically wore when meeting with Natalie or Zoe. His phone chimed with a text from Zoe. "Party starting. We'll call it 3. Miss you, Dad." Barrett smiled at the small victory. Despite everything, his bond with Zoe remained, albeit strained by Natalie's influence and Barrett's necessary deceptions. At 2:45, Barrett settled into his home office. He had arranged the background carefully, subtle but unmistakable signs of wealth and power. A rare painting partially visible, built-in bookshelves with leather-bound first editions, a window view of Elliott Bay and the Olympic Mountains beyond. His laptop chimed at precisely 3 o'clock. Barrett took a deep breath and accepted the video call. Zoe's face filled the screen. She was in the venue's restroom, her carefully styled hair and makeup indicating Natalie's influence. "Dad, happy not being at my birthday," she attempted to joke. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Barrett replied warmly. "You look beautiful." "Thanks," she said, her smile faltering. "I wish you were here." "Me too. How's the party?" "Boring. Mom invited all these people I barely know. Max's business associates and their kids. They're all out there networking while pretending to celebrate me turning 16. Barrett nodded sympathetically. "I'm sorry, Zoe. That's not right." She shrugged. "Whatever. Look, I got you on my new phone, Max's gift. It's the latest model." She flipped the camera to show the sleek device. "Very nice," Barrett said, noting the $1,200 phone was exactly the kind of flashy gift Max would choose, expensive enough to impress, but requiring no actual thought. "Zoe, there you are." Natalie's voice came from off-screen. "Everyone's waiting for the cake." She stopped abruptly as she entered the frame and saw Barrett. "Oh, you're on with your father." 3 years had changed Natalie little. Still beautiful at 40, with her highlighted blonde hair and careful makeup. She wore a designer dress that Barrett recognized from a recent fashion magazine, likely $5,000 minimum. "Hello, Natalie," he said calmly. Her eyes narrowed at his appearance. "You dressed up to take a call from your daughter's bathroom?" "I had business today," Barrett replied simply. Natalie's mouth tightened. "Well, we need to get back to the party. Max has arranged a special presentation." "Mom, I just started talking to Dad," Zoe protested. "5 minutes," Natalie said firmly. "Then cake." She disappeared from view. Zoe rolled her eyes. "See what I mean? It's her party, not mine." "It'll be over soon," Barrett consoled her. "Maybe next weekend we can." The bathroom door opened again. "Zoe, seriously, what's taking so?" A man's voice cut off as he entered the frame. Tall, fake-tanned, with that too-white smile Barrett had seen in photos. Maxwell Holloway. Max stared at the screen, recognition slowly dawning on his face as he took in Barrett's appearance and surroundings. "Who's this?" Max asked, his tone condescending. "My dad," Zoe said tersely. "Dad, this is Max." Max's smile was patronizing. "Ah, the ex-Natalie's told me all about you. Still doing that little consulting thing." Barrett's smile was shark-like. "Among other things." "Well, sorry you couldn't make it today. Very exclusive venue, you understand. Need to maintain certain standards." Max placed a proprietary hand on Zoe's shoulder. Barrett leaned forward slightly. "I understand completely, Maxwell. Standards are important in all aspects of life, business included." Something in Barrett's tone made Max pause. He studied Barrett more carefully, taking in the expensive suit, the office background, the confident demeanor that didn't match Natalie's descriptions. "Have we met before?" Max asked, his smugness faltering slightly. "Not formally," Barrett replied, "though you've been in several meetings with my representatives." Max frowned. "What company did you say you were with?" "I didn't. But you've been negotiating with my lending consortium for the Waterfront Place project. And my real estate division is reviewing your bid for the Westlake Center acquisition." The color drained from Max's face. His eyes widened as realization hit him. You can't be." "Barrett Thorne," Barrett confirmed, his voice like ice. "CEO of Thorne Innovations Group, owner of Cascade Investment Partners, and majority stakeholder in Pacific Northwest Holdings." Max's mouth opened and closed several times before he managed to speak. But that's impossible. Thorne Innovations is worth billions. He turned to Zoe. "Your mother said he was a failed businessman." Zoe looked between Max and the screen, confusion evident. "Dad, what's going on?" Before Barrett could respond, Max blurted out, "Hello, boss. I had no idea. There must be some misunderstanding." Natalie appeared behind them, irritation on her face. "What's taking so long?" "The guests are—" She stopped when she saw Max's expression. "What's wrong?" Max grabbed the phone, angling it so Natalie could see Barrett clearly. "Did you know who your ex-husband actually is?" he hissed. Natalie stared at the screen. "What are you talking about?" "That's just Barrett. Just Barrett." Max laughed, a high, nervous sound. "Natalie, your ex-husband is Barrett Thorne. The Barrett Thorne. My company has been courting his investment group for months. He controls half the commercial real estate in Seattle." Natalie's face went blank with shock. That's not possible. Barrett was struggling when we divorced. His business was barely staying afloat." "That's what you wanted to believe," Barrett said quietly. "I never corrected you." The silence that followed was deafening. Zoe looked shell-shocked. Max appeared terrified. And Natalie's expression shifted rapidly from disbelief to calculation. "Barrett," she finally said, her PR training kicking in as she attempted a warm smile. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Of course you're welcome at Zoe's party. In fact, why don't you come right now? We'd all love to see you." Barrett checked his watch. "I'm afraid I have a board meeting in 30 minutes. Perhaps another time." "But surely you could," Max began. "Goodbye, Zoe." "Happy birthday," Barrett interrupted. "We'll talk soon." He ended the call before they could respond. Barrett leaned back in his chair, heart pounding despite his outward calm. The moment of revelation had arrived sooner than he'd planned, but the shocked expressions on their faces had been worth the wait. His phone immediately lit up with texts. From Natalie. "We need to talk. Call me ASAP. From Max. Mr. Thorne, sincere apologies for the misunderstanding. Would very much like to discuss privately. Can meet at your convenience. And finally, from Zoe. Dad? What just happened? Why didn't you ever tell me? Barrett ignored them all and called Flynn instead. How did it go? His friend asked. Better than expected, Barrett replied. The grenade has been thrown. Now we watch the explosion. Chapter 5, Damage Control. The Four Seasons ballroom descended into chaos after the video call ended. 16-year-old Zoe sat stunned on a bathroom couch, while Natalie paced frantically before her. This is insane, Natalie muttered. It can't be true. He was struggling when we split. The settlement was modest. He drove a sensible car. We lived in a normal house. Well, he's not struggling now. Max snapped, his normally perfect hair disheveled from running his hands through it repeatedly. Do you have any idea what this means? My entire waterfront development hinges on financing from his company. Natalie rounded on him. This is your fault. You're the one who insisted he couldn't come. Because you told me he was a nobody. Max shouted. A small-time consultant who couldn't hack it in the real business world. Those were your exact words. Zoe looked between them. Her birthday celebration forgotten. Stop it. Both of you. She stood, her designer dress swishing angrily. All this time, you've been telling me Dad was a failure, making me feel sorry for him. And now I find out he's some billionaire. We don't know that he's a billionaire, Natalie said weakly. Thorne Innovations is valued at over $2 billion, Max countered, checking his phone frantically. I just looked it up. How did I not connect the names before? Barrett Thorne Consulting. Thorne Innovations. God, I'm an idiot. Outside the bathroom, the party guests murmured in confusion. The birthday girl had disappeared, the cake sat uncut, and the hosts were nowhere to be seen. We need to fix this, Natalie decided, switching to crisis management mode. Max, go out there and tell everyone we're having a small family moment. Zoe will be out soon for cake. I need to call Barrett. Good luck with that, Max muttered, straightening his tie before heading out. Natalie pulled out her phone and dialed Barrett. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again with the same result, then sent another text. Barrett, please call me. We need to talk about Zoe. Zoe watched her mother with new eyes. You left him because you thought he wasn't successful enough. It wasn't a question. Natalie's perfectly manicured hand trembled slightly. It was more complicated than that, honey. Was it? Zoe's voice was hollow. Because I remember when you started seeing Max. You kept talking about his house, his cars, his connections. You never talked like that about Dad. Your father and I had issues long before. Save it. Zoe interrupted, standing up. I'm going home. Home? Zoe, this is your birthday party. There are 50 people out there. Your friends. Max's business contacts. Not mine. Zoe grabbed her purse. I'm calling an Uber. Don't be ridiculous. We'll talk about this later. Natalie grabbed her daughter's arm. Zoe pulled away. Like we talked about banning Dad from my party? Or how about all those times you told me not to expect much from him for birthdays and Christmas because he simply can't afford it? Natalie flinched. I was trying to manage your expectations. Well, consider my expectations completely unmanaged. Zoe stalked out of the bathroom, leaving her mother staring after her. Meanwhile, across town, Barrett sat in his office with Flynn and Lyle, watching the fallout on multiple screens. One showed his phone with incoming messages. Another displayed the security feed from the Four Seasons lobby, courtesy of the hotel's head of security, a former client who owed Barrett a favor. Look at this, Flynn said, pointing to a financial alert. Holloway Development Group stock just dropped 3% in the last hour. Word must be getting out about the connection. Barrett nodded. Investors are nervous. They're wondering what it means that Holloway has been courting me for financing while simultaneously banning me from a family event. Not a good look, Lyle agreed. Corporate world runs on relationships. Holloway just publicly insulted one of the most powerful men in Seattle. Barrett's private line rang, a number few people possessed. He checked the ID. Olivia West, his former sister-in-law and Natalie's younger sister. Olivia, he answered. This is unexpected. Barrett. Her voice was guarded but not hostile. I just left Zoe's party. It's a mess over there. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? she asked skeptically. Because from where I'm standing, you just dropped a nuclear bomb on my sister's life. Barrett leaned back in his chair. I simply answered a video call from my daughter on her birthday, a birthday party I was expressly forbidden from attending. Olivia was silent for a moment. Then, why didn't you ever tell me? We've had coffee every month since the divorce. You let me believe you were struggling. I'll let everyone believe what they wanted to believe, Barrett replied. You were one of the few who treated me the same regardless. Another pause. Zoe left the party in tears. She's pretty upset about being lied to by both her parents. Barrett closed his eyes briefly, the first crack in his composure. Where is she now? Heading to my place. She doesn't want to see Natalie or Max. Thank you for telling me, Barrett said quietly. Don't thank me yet, Olivia replied. I'm still processing the fact that my brother-in-law is apparently a secret billionaire. Also, Natalie is on the warpath. She's convinced you hid assets during the divorce. Everything was disclosed according to legal requirements, Barrett said calmly. The value of my holdings at that time was accurately reported. What happened after we separated is another matter. God, you always were 10 steps ahead, Olivia said, a reluctant admiration in her voice. I have to go. Zoe's arriving. Just be careful, Barrett. This isn't just about Natalie and that jackass she's dating. Zoe's caught in the middle. After hanging up, Barrett turned to Flynn and Lyle. Zoe's staying with Olivia tonight. Flynn nodded. Good. Gives everyone time to cool off. He hesitated. What exactly is your endgame here, Barrett? Humiliating Max and Natalie? Or something more? Barrett's expression hardened. They need to understand the consequences of their actions. All of them. Even Zoe. Lyle asked quietly. Zoe will learn a valuable lesson about judgment and loyalty, Barrett replied. Sometimes the truth hurts before it heals. His phone buzzed with another text from Max. Mr. Thorne, I've been trying to reach you. The Waterfront Place presentation is Monday. Please don't let personal matters affect our professional relationship. I had no idea of your connection to Natalie when we began discussions. Barrett showed the message to Flynn, who laughed. That's a lie. He's been with Natalie for years. Of course it's a lie, Barrett agreed. And Monday's presentation is about to become very interesting. He picked up his phone and called his executive assistant. Ava, contact the board. I'll be personally attending the Holloway Development presentation on Monday. An hour later, Barrett's security team reported that Natalie had arrived at his building, demanding to see him. He instructed the lobby security to send her up. No point delaying the inevitable confrontation. When Natalie stormed into his office, she stopped short at the sight of the expansive space with its panoramic views and expensive furnishings. How long? She demanded without preamble. How long have you been living like this while I thought you were barely getting by? Barrett dismissed Flynn and Lyle with a nod before turning to his ex-wife. Would you like a drink? You seem upset. Upset? You've been lying to me, to our daughter, for years. I never lied, Barrett corrected. I simply allowed you to believe what you wanted to believe. You decided I was a failure and left. I didn't correct your assumption. Natalie paced the office, taking in the evidence of Barrett's success. This is crazy. You were struggling when we were together. Your business was barely breaking even. The business you saw was barely breaking even, Barrett agreed. The others were quite profitable. Others? Natalie stopped pacing. What others? Barrett gestured to a wall displaying framed corporate logos, dozens of them, all subsidiaries of Thorne Innovations. I kept my real work compartmentalized. Only a few trusted people knew the full extent of my operations. Why? Natalie's voice cracked. Why would you hide this from me? I was your wife. You were, Barrett acknowledged, his tone cooling. A wife who measured her husband's worth by his bank account rather than his character. A wife who left when she thought she'd found someone more successful. Natalie flinched. That's not fair. Our marriage had problems. Yes, it did, Barrett interrupted. And instead of working through them, you jumped ship to the first flashy alternative that came along. How's that working out for you now, Natalie? Now that you know Max isn't the biggest fish in the pond after all. Natalie's expression shifted, anger giving way to calculation. She moved closer, her voice softening. Barrett, we should talk about this rationally. For Zoe's sake. She's confused and hurt. As she should be. She's been taught to disrespect her father based on lies. Not lies, Natalie protested. Misunderstandings. We can fix this. Maybe we all need a fresh start. Barrett laughed, the sound devoid of humor. A fresh start? Is that what this is about? Now that you know what I'm really worth, you're reconsidering your options? Natalie's face flushed. That's cruel. I'm thinking about our daughter. No, you're thinking about yourself. You always have. Barrett stood, signaling the end of the conversation. Go back to Max, Natalie. Explain to him how you've sabotaged his business by turning his potential biggest investor against him. I'm sure he'll be very understanding. Barrett, please. We're done here, he said, pressing the intercom. Ava, please show Ms. Kingston out. As Natalie left, fury and fear warring in her expression, Barrett returned to the window, gazing out at his city. Phase 1 was complete. The revelation had landed with maximum impact. Now it was time for Phase 2. Chapter 6, The Iron Fist. Monday morning arrived with dark clouds and a sense of impending doom at Holloway Development Group headquarters. Max Holloway had barely slept all weekend, alternating between desperate attempts to reach Barrett Thorne and frantic meetings with his executive team. The Waterfront Place project was Holloway's most ambitious development to date, a $120 million mixed-use complex that would either cement his legacy or destroy his company. And the primary financing, a $75 million package he'd spent months negotiating, came through Cascade Investment Partners, Barrett Thorne's company. He's going to pull the funding, Max muttered, pacing his office while his CFO, Dennis Palmer, watched with increasing concern. We don't know that, Dennis countered, though his tone lacked conviction. The deal makes financial sense regardless of personal issues. Max rounded on him. I banned a man from his daughter's birthday party, called him a loser, to his face. Technically, you didn't know it was him, Dennis offered weakly. That makes it worse. Max collapsed into his chair. The presentation is in 2 hours. Thorne confirmed he's attending personally. He never attends these meetings. So make it the best damn presentation of your life, Dennis advised. Apologize briefly at the start, then wow him with the numbers. Max nodded jerkily, then froze as his assistant buzzed through. Mr. Holloway, Natalie Kingston is here to see you. Not now, Max hissed. She's already coming in, sir. The door opened and Natalie strode in, immaculately dressed, but with tension evident in every line of her body. We need to talk. I'm preparing for the most important meeting of my career, Max snapped. The meeting that your ex-husband might torpedo because of you. Because of me? Natalie's voice rose. You're the one who insisted he couldn't come to the party, because you described him as a pathetic small-timer. Max shouted back. Dennis cleared his throat. I'll give you 2 a moment. He slipped out, closing the door behind him. Natalie collapsed into a chair. This is a nightmare. Zoe won't return my calls. She's staying with my sister. And Barrett looked at me like I was nothing. Join the club, Max muttered. 3 years we've been together. And you never thought to mention that your ex-husband might be the Barrett Thorne? I didn't know. Natalie protested. He was struggling when we divorced. The settlement was minimal. Minimal by what standard? What exactly did you get? Natalie hesitated. The house, worth about $600,000 then. Child support for Zoe. A one-time payment of $250,000. Max stared at her. That's it? From a billionaire. He wasn't a billionaire then, Natalie insisted. At least, I didn't think he was. Or maybe, Max said slowly, he was already successful and hid it from you. And you were too self-absorbed to notice. Natalie's face hardened. That's unfair. Is it? Max stood, straightening his tie. I have a meeting to prepare for. One that might save my company from the mess your lies have created. My lies. Natalie stood as well. I'm not the one who paraded around Seattle pretending to be less successful than I was. No, you're the one who left your husband when you thought he couldn't provide the lifestyle you wanted. Max's voice was cold. What does that make you, Natalie? She slapped him, the crack echoing in the office. Don't you dare judge me. You love that I left Barrett for you. It fed your ego. Max touched his cheek, his expression shifting to something calculating. We'll discuss this later. Right now, I need to salvage my business. After Natalie stormed out, Max called Dennis back in. Any word from Thorne's team about the meeting? Dennis checked his tablet. Just that Mr. Thorne will be attending personally with his chief counsel and CFO. The lending consortium representatives will also be present. Max nodded, his mind racing. Let's go over the presentation one more time. And Dennis, if things go south, activate Plan B. The Chinese investors? Dennis looked concerned. They're offering worse terms, and they'll want controlling interest. Better than bankruptcy, Max replied grimly. Across town, Barrett sat in his private conference room with Flynn and Lyle, reviewing their strategy. Holloway will be desperate, Flynn predicted. He'll grovel, then try to separate the business from the personal. Barrett nodded. And when that fails, he'll mention his backup financing option, the Chinese consortium. Lyle raised an eyebrow, which he already bought out last week. Precisely. Barrett smiled thinly. Every escape route blocked. Every alternative compromised. It's not enough to defeat an opponent, gentlemen. True victory means they never had a chance to begin with. What about Zoe? Flynn asked cautiously. Olivia says she's still pretty shaken up. Barrett's expression softened slightly. I've arranged to meet her tomorrow. She deserves the full truth directly from me. And Natalie? The softness vanished. Natalie made her choices. Now she'll live with the consequences. 2 hours later, Barrett sat at the head of the conference table in Cascade Investment Partners' main boardroom. Around him sat his executive team, the representatives from the lending consortium, and directly across from him, Maxwell Holloway and his team. Max looked terrible, expensive suit and careful grooming unable to hide the stress of the past 48 hours. He attempted a confident smile as he began his presentation, only faltering slightly when he addressed Barrett directly. Mr. Thorne, before we begin, I want to apologize for the unfortunate misunderstanding at your daughter's birthday celebration. Had you known I was wealthy, you would have treated me differently, Barrett finished for him. That says everything I need to know about your character, Mr. Holloway. But please, continue with your presentation. I'm curious to see if your business acumen exceeds your personal judgment. A flush crept up Max's neck, but he pressed on, detailing the waterfront place development with forced enthusiasm. The presentation was solid. The numbers made sense. The design was innovative. The market analysis thorough. When he finished, Barrett simply nodded and turned to his CFO. Your assessment? The fundamentals are sound, the CFO acknowledged. Expected return on investment is 12 to 15% over 5 years. Risk factors are within acceptable parameters. Barrett turned back to Max. On paper, Mr. Holloway, your proposal merits consideration. Unfortunately, I find myself questioning the reliability of the management team. Max's face paled. Mr. Thorne, I assure you, my company has an excellent track record. A company is only as good as the judgment of its leadership, Barrett interrupted. And your judgment, Mr. Holloway, has proved wanting. This is business, Max protested. Personal matters shouldn't influence. Everything is personal, Mr. Holloway. Every business deal is built on relationships, on trust. You've demonstrated that you judge people based on their perceived financial status rather than their character. That's not someone I choose to do business with. The room fell silent. Max looked stricken. Sir, this project represents years of work. We've already invested millions in preliminary development. Then I suggest you find alternative financing, Barrett replied coldly. Perhaps your Chinese contacts? Max's eyes widened slightly. How could Thor know about that? I've been exploring other options. Eastern Star Investment Group, I believe. Barrett smiled thinly. I should mention that Thorne Innovations acquired a controlling interest in Eastern Star last week. They'll be declining your proposal as well. The blood drained from Max's face. That's impossible. Is it? Barrett stood, buttoning his suit jacket. This meeting is concluded. Cascade Investment Partners will not be providing financing for Waterfront Place or any other Holloway development projects. Good day, gentlemen. As Barrett and his team prepared to leave, Max surged to his feet. You can't do this. This is personal vengeance, not business. Barrett paused at the door. You're right, Mr. Holloway. It is personal. Consider it a lesson in treating all people with respect, regardless of their perceived worth. He turned to go, then added, "Oh, and do give my regards to Natalie. I'm sure she'll be very understanding about your professional setbacks." Outside in the hallway, Flynn matched stride with Barrett as they headed toward the elevator. "That was brutal. That was necessary," Barrett corrected. "Phase 2 complete." "What's Phase 3? Flynn asked. Barrett's expression was cold and determined. Total capitulation. Chapter 7. The Truth Revealed. The following morning, Barrett waited in a private room at Cascadia Cafe, a quiet establishment overlooking Puget Sound. He'd chosen the location carefully, neutral ground for his conversation with Zoe, away from both his world and Natalie's. When Zoe entered, Barrett was struck by how adult she looked. At 16, she carried herself with a composure that belied the emotional turmoil of recent days. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, deliberately casual, he noted, a contrast to the designer outfit from her party. "Hi, Dad," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Thank you for coming," Barrett replied. "I know this has been confusing." Zoe stared at him, eyes searching his face. "Why didn't you tell me? All these years, I thought." She trailed off. "You thought I was struggling," Barrett finished. "I know, and I'm sorry for the deception. But why?" The hurt in her voice was palpable. "Did you not trust me?" Barrett reached across the table, offering his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Zoe took it. "It wasn't about trust," he explained. "When your mother left, she made it clear that financial success was her primary measure of worth. I wanted to know who would stand by me when they thought I had nothing. So it was a test? For 3 years." Zoe pulled her hand back. "That's messed up, Dad." "Perhaps," Barrett acknowledged. "But it revealed important truths. About your mother. About Max. About many so-called friends and business associates. And about me?" Zoe challenged. "Was I being tested too?" Barrett's expression softened. "You were caught in the middle, Zoe. Your mother filled your head with a certain narrative about me. I don't blame you for believing it. Mom says you hid assets during the divorce, that you cheated her. I disclosed everything required by law," Barrett replied carefully. "The values at that time were accurate. The growth happened after we separated, growth she would have shared in had she not decided I wasn't worth staying with." Zoe studied him. "You've been planning this, haven't you? The reveal of my party. It wasn't an accident." Barrett smiled slightly. "You've always been perceptive." "No, it wasn't entirely accidental, though the timing was accelerated. Because Max banned you from my party. That was the catalyst, yes." Zoe was quiet for a moment, processing. "I heard Max's company is in trouble, that you pulled some big loan." "Financing," Barrett corrected. "And yes, Cascade Investment Partners has decided not to fund his waterfront place project. Because of me? Because of what happened at the party. Because Maxwell Holloway revealed himself to be someone who judges people based solely on their perceived financial status. That's not someone I choose to do business with." Zoe frowned. "So you're ruining his business because he was rude to you?" "I'm choosing not to enable someone who behaved dishonorably," Barrett countered. "There's a difference. Mom says you're being vindictive, that this is about punishing her for leaving you." Barrett's expression hardened slightly. "Your mother is entitled to her opinion. But consider this. For 3 years, I've kept my distance. I've paid child support promptly. I've never spoken ill of her to you. It was only when I was explicitly excluded from your birthday, when Max decided I wasn't worthy of attending my own daughter's celebration, that I revealed the truth." Zoe sighed heavily. "Everything's such a mess now. Mom and Max are fighting constantly. She's staying in a hotel. And I'm still with Aunt Olivia because I don't want to deal with any of it." "I'm sorry you're caught in the middle," Barrett said sincerely. "That was never my intention." "What was your intention, Dad?" Zoe asked directly. "What do you want out of all this?" Barrett considered his answer carefully. "Justice," he finally said. "Recognition of the truth. And consequences for those who betrayed trust. Including me?" Zoe's voice was small. "You didn't betray me, Zoe," Barrett assured her. "You were a child influenced by the adults around you. But now you're old enough to see the truth for yourself." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the cafe entrance. Natalie's voice carried across the room. "I know they're here. I need to speak with him immediately. Zoe closed her eyes briefly. Great. She tracked me down. Barrett's phone buzzed with a text from Lyle, positioned discreetly near the entrance. Natalie causing a scene. Want me to intervene? Barrett texted back. Let her through. Moments later, Natalie stormed to their table, eyes wild with anger and fear. How dare you meet with our daughter without telling me? I'm 16, Mom, Zoe pointed out. I can have coffee with my father without permission. Not when he's manipulating you against me. Natalie turned to Barrett. First you sabotage my relationship, then you destroy Max's business. Now you're turning my daughter against me? You've done that yourself, Barrett replied calmly. Please sit down. You're making a scene. Natalie remained standing. Max's investors are pulling out. The bank is calling in loans. You did this, didn't you? I merely declined to finance his project, Barrett said. If others are following suit, perhaps they share my concerns about his business judgment. This isn't about business judgment. Natalie hissed. This is revenge. Mom, seriously, sit down or leave, Zoe said firmly. You're embarrassing yourself. Natalie stared at her daughter, then slowly sank into a chair. You don't understand what he's doing, Zoe. This is calculated destruction. I understand more than you think, Zoe replied. I understand that you left Dad because you thought he wasn't successful enough. I understand that you've been telling me he's a failure for years. And I understand that the moment you found out he's actually rich, you started having second thoughts about Max. Natalie flinched. That's not true, isn't it? Zoe challenged. Aunt Olivia told me you've been talking about how you and Dad might reconnect for my sake. Barrett raised an eyebrow. Have you, Natalie? How pragmatic of you. Natalie flushed, then rallied. You've been lying to everyone for years, Barrett. Living this double life. How is that any better than what you accuse me of? I never lied, Barrett corrected. I simply allowed people to see what they expected to see. Those who valued me regardless of my perceived financial status, they knew the truth. Olivia, Flynn, Lyle, people who saw my character, not my bank account. And now you're what? Taking revenge on everyone who didn't pass your sick little test. Natalie demanded. I'm allowing natural consequences to unfold, Barrett replied. Nothing more. Natalie laughed bitterly. Natural consequences? You're deliberately destroying Max's company. I declined to invest in it, Barrett corrected. If his company cannot survive without my investment, that speaks to fundamental weaknesses in his business model. Stop it, both of you, Zoe interrupted. This isn't accomplishing anything. She stood. I'm going back to Aunt Olivia's. I need space from both of you right now. As Zoe walked away, Natalie turned to Barrett, her voice low with fury. This isn't over. You think you've won, but you haven't. Barrett met her gaze steadily. It was never about winning, Natalie. It was about truth. And the truth is that you valued wealth over loyalty, appearance over substance. You taught our daughter to do the same. That ends now. Is that a threat? A promise, Barrett replied. Phase 3 begins tomorrow. I suggest you prepare yourself. Natalie's eyes widened slightly. What does that mean? But Barrett was already standing, dropping cash on the table for the untouched coffee. Goodbye, Natalie. Give my regards to Max. As Barrett walked away, his phone buzzed with a text from Flynn. Chinese investors pulled out officially. Holloway stock down 27% today. Board calling emergency meeting tonight. Barrett smiled thinly. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Chapter 8. The Fall. The emergency board meeting at Holloway Development Group lasted until 2 a.m. By morning, business news channels were reporting that Maxwell Holloway had been voted out as CEO by his own board of directors. The company's stock had plummeted 40% in 2 days, with major projects stalled and investors fleeing. Barrett watched the coverage from his office, expression impassive as financial analysts dissected Holloway's downfall. Sources close to the company suggest the collapse of financing for the Waterfront Place project triggered a cascade of failures, the CNBC reporter explained. Major investor Barrett Thorne of Thorne Innovations Group withdrew support unexpectedly, prompting other backers to reconsider their positions. Flynn entered with coffee, nodding toward the screen. They're calling it the Holloway implosion. Fastest corporate downfall in Seattle since the dot-com crash. Any word on Max himself? Barrett asked. Holed up at his lake house. Not taking calls. Flynn hesitated. Natalie's been trying to reach you. 11 messages since last night. Barrett nodded. And Zoe, still with Olivia. She's watching all this unfold from a distance. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Thorne, Ava announced, the Holloway Development Group Board is on line 1. They're requesting an urgent meeting. Barrett exchanged a glance with Flynn. Right on schedule. Put them through. The board chairman's voice was tense. Mr. Thorne, in light of recent changes in leadership, we were hoping to discuss the possibility of reviving discussions about the Waterfront Place financing. I see, Barrett replied coolly. And what assurances can you provide that the new management will demonstrate better judgment than Mr. Holloway? We've appointed Thomas Reed as interim CEO. He's eager to meet with you personally to discuss a path forward. Very well. 3 o'clock today in my office. After hanging up, Barrett turned to Flynn. Thomas Reed was Holloway's CFO, correct? Flynn nodded. Been with the company 15 years. Respected in the industry. No personal connection to your situation with Natalie or Max. Perfect, Barrett murmured. Phase 3 proceeds. Throughout the day, Barrett monitored the fallout. Max's ouster dominated local business news. Financial analysts dissected Holloway Development's precarious position. Social media buzzed with rumors about the connection between Barrett, Max, and Natalie. At 1:30, Natalie arrived unannounced at Thorne Tower, demanding to see Barrett. Security called up for instructions. Send her to conference room B, Barrett directed. I'll meet her there. When Barrett entered the conference room, Natalie was pacing frantically. She looked disheveled, her usual perfect appearance fraying at the edges. You've destroyed him, she accused without preamble. The board fired Max. The bank is foreclosing on our house. His assets are frozen. Barrett sat calmly. I've done nothing illegal or unethical. I declined to finance a project led by someone whose judgment I couldn't trust. Others made their own decisions. This is vindictive, Natalie cried. You're punishing him, punishing us because I left you. No, Natalie, Barrett corrected. I'm allowing natural consequences to unfold. Max built his business on appearances and connections rather than solid fundamentals. One setback shouldn't cause a complete collapse unless the foundation was already weak. What do you want? Natalie demanded. Money? An apology? Tell me what will make this stop. Barrett studied her with clinical detachment. There is nothing you can offer that would interest me, Natalie. Not anymore. What about Zoe? Natalie tried a different angle. She's watching her mother's life implode. Is that what you want for your daughter? Zoe is watching the consequences of poor choices, Barrett replied. It's an important lesson. Natalie collapsed into a chair, the fight suddenly leaving her. I didn't know, Barrett. I truly didn't know you were successful when I left. Would it have made a difference? Barrett asked quietly. If you'd known I was wealthy, would you have stayed? Natalie opened her mouth, then closed it again, unable to answer. That's what I thought, Barrett said. You didn't leave because our marriage had problems, Natalie. You left because you thought you found a more profitable alternative. And now that alternative has proven disappointing. So this is my punishment. Natalie whispered. Financial ruin? Public humiliation. This is reality, Barrett corrected. Reality without the cushion of my protection. You chose this path, Natalie. Now you get to walk it. I have nothing left, she said, voice breaking. Max is blaming me for everything. We're losing the house. My friends won't return my calls. You have exactly what you had when you left me, Barrett pointed out. The settlement was fair. The house I bought you is paid for. You have skills and education. What you don't have is the lifestyle that Max's money provided. Money he didn't actually have, as it turns out. Natalie stared at him, a dawning realization in her eyes. You're not going to help me, are you? No matter what I say or do. No, Barrett confirmed. I'm not. Not even for Zoe's sake. Zoe is nearly an adult. She'll always have my support. But you, Natalie, you made your choices. I respected those choices for 3 years. I kept my distance. I allowed you to build your new life with Max. It was only when you both actively disrespected me, banned me from my own daughter's celebration, that I responded. Natalie was quiet for a long moment. Then what happens now? Now, Barrett stood. Now, I have a meeting with Holloway Development Group's board of directors. They're very eager to discuss financing options with me. Without Max, of course. You're going to save his company after destroying him? Natalie asked incredulously. I'm going to acquire his company, Barrett corrected, at a significant discount. It's a sound business decision. And us? Me and Zoe. Zoe will always be my daughter. She'll want for nothing. Barrett moved toward the door. As for you, Natalie, you're free to rebuild your life however you see fit. Just not with my assistance. Barrett, Natalie called as he reached the door. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I'm truly sorry. Barrett paused, his back to her. Your apology is noted, Natalie. But as you once taught me, some things can't be forgiven. At 3 p.m. sharp, Barrett met with the Holloway Development Board. The directors were deferential, almost obsequious, as they presented their revised proposal for Waterfront Place. Thomas Reed, the interim CEO, outlined changes to the management structure and financing approach. We've removed all of Mr. Holloway's personal projects from the development pipeline, Reed explained, focusing only on ventures with proven market demand and realistic financial models. Barrett nodded, reviewing the revised projections. And Mr. Holloway's equity position? The board has agreed to a buyout of his shares, Reed replied. Given the current valuation, it's a modest package. I see, Barrett said. And what would the board's position be on an acquisition offer for the entire company? The directors exchanged glances. We would be open to discussing such an offer, the chairman said carefully. Barrett smiled thinly. Excellent. My team will provide terms this evening. I suggest you review them promptly. As the directors filed out, Flynn entered with a tablet. I assume we're moving forward with the acquisition? Barrett nodded. Prepare the offer. 50 cents on the dollar of last week's valuation. Non-negotiable. And Flynn, make sure the terms specify that all current executives must resign upon completion, except for Thomas Reed. Cleaning house completely? New ownership, new beginning, Barrett replied. No connections to the past. Later that evening, as Barrett worked in his home office, his secure line rang. It was Olivia. I thought you should know, she said without preamble. Zoe's decided to move in with me permanently. She doesn't want to live with Natalie anymore. Barrett set down his pen. Is she certain? That's a significant decision. She's been watching everything unfold, Olivia replied. The news about Max, Natalie's meltdown, your acquisition of Holloway Development. She's connecting the dots. And she's impressed by your strategic thinking, but disturbed by your ruthlessness, Olivia said bluntly. Her words, not mine. Barrett was silent for a moment. Is she afraid of me? Not afraid, Olivia clarified. But she's seeing a side of you she never knew existed. It's a lot to process. I never wanted to hurt her, Barrett said quietly. I know that, Olivia assured him. And deep down, so does she. But Barrett, this scorched earth approach, it's affecting more than just Natalie and Max. It was necessary, Barrett insisted. Was it? Olivia challenged. Or has this become about proving something to yourself? About making sure everyone knows Barrett Thorne is not a man to be crossed? Barrett had no immediate answer. Just think about that, Olivia continued more gently. Zoe wants to have dinner with you tomorrow. Just the two of you. She has questions. Of course, Barrett agreed. Tell her to name the time and place. After hanging up, Barrett stood at his window for a long time, staring out at the city lights. For the first time since this began, doubt crept into his mind. Had he gone too far? Had his pursuit of justice become simple vengeance? His phone chimed with a news alert. Breaking, Holloway Development Group Board accepts Thorne Innovations acquisition offer. Barrett closed his eyes briefly. Phase 3 complete. Total capitulation achieved. So why didn't it feel like victory? Chapter 9, No Forgiveness. Zoe chose a small Italian restaurant for their dinner. The same place Barrett used to take her for birthday celebrations when she was younger. It was a deliberate choice, he recognized. A reminder of simpler times. She was already seated when he arrived, wearing a simple sweater and jeans rather than the designer clothes Natalie preferred. Her expression was guarded but not hostile. "Thanks for coming," Barrett said, taking the seat across from her. "I want to understand," Zoe replied directly. "All of it. No more secrets or half-truths." Barrett nodded. "Ask me anything. When did you actually become successful? Before or after Mom left?" "Both," Barrett answered. "I was already building something substantial while we were married, but I kept it compartmentalized. The real growth happened after the divorce." "Why hide it from her?" "From everyone." Barrett considered his answer carefully. "I saw how wealth changed people around me. Friends became sycophants. Business associates became opportunists. Your mother became increasingly focused on appearances and status. So you tested her?" Zoe's tone was neutral. "In a way," Barrett acknowledged. "I wanted to know if she loved me or the lifestyle she thought I could provide. And she failed the test." "She made her choice," Barrett said simply. Zoe was quiet for a moment, turning her water glass slowly. "The company you just bought?" "Max's company. What happens to it now?" "It becomes a subsidiary of Thorn Innovations. We'll complete the viable projects, wind down the others. The good employees will keep their jobs. The name will change. And Max himself? He's out. Completely. The acquisition terms excluded him from any ongoing role or benefit." Zoe nodded, processing this. "And Mom?" "That's between her and Max," Barrett replied. "My understanding is that their relationship has deteriorated." "That's one way to put it," Zoe said with a hint of bitterness. "She calls me crying every day. Their house is in foreclosure. Her friends have abandoned her. It's like watching someone's life implode in real time." Barrett studied his daughter carefully. "Does that bother you?" "Of course it bothers me." Zoe's composure cracked slightly. "She's still my mother, Dad, no matter what she did to you." "I haven't done anything to her directly," Barrett pointed out. "I simply stopped protecting her from the consequences of her choices. By systematically destroying her boyfriend's life and company. By declining to do business with someone who demonstrated poor character and judgment," Barrett corrected. "Everything else followed naturally." Zoe looked at him intently. "This wasn't just business, Dad. Be honest with me. This was personal." Barrett met her gaze. "Yes," he admitted. "It was personal. When Max banned me from your birthday, it crossed a line. Not because of my ego, but because he tried to sever my connection to you, my daughter. That I could not forgive. And Mom? Can you forgive her?" Barrett was silent for a long moment. "No," he finally said. "I can't. Even if she's truly sorry? Even if she's learned her lesson?" "Some betrayals run too deep," Barrett replied quietly. "Some choices have permanent consequences." Zoe looked down at her untouched meal. "She wants to meet with you, to apologize properly. She thinks if you just talk, it won't change anything." Barrett interrupted gently. "I don't hate your mother, Zoe. I don't wish her ill, but I don't forgive her either. And I never will." "That seems harsh." "It's honest," Barrett countered. "Would you prefer I pretend forgiveness I don't feel?" Zoe sighed heavily. "I don't know what I want. Everything's changed so fast. 2 weeks ago, I thought my dad was a struggling consultant and my mom was happily dating a successful developer. Now you see the reality behind the facade," Barrett finished. "It's not easy, I know. What about Max?" Zoe asked. "He came to Aunt Olivia's yesterday, looking for Mom. He was broken, Dad, literally begging for help. And nothing. Aunt Olivia sent him away." Zoe studied her father's face. "He might lose everything. His reputation, his career, his home. Does that satisfy you?" Barrett's expression remained calm. "It's not about satisfaction, Zoe. It's about justice. Justice or revenge. Perhaps both," Barrett admitted. "Max chose to judge me based solely on my perceived financial status. He treated me with contempt when he thought I was beneath him. Now he learns what true power actually looks like." Zoe was quiet for a long time. "You know, Mom always said you were cold when it came to business. That underneath the charm was something unyielding. I never believed her until now." Barrett didn't flinch from her assessment. "In business, as in life, clarity is essential. Max and your mother made their choices with clear eyes. Now they face the consequences with equal clarity. And me?" Zoe asked quietly. "What are the consequences for me?" "For believing what Mom told me about you." Barrett reached across the table, taking her hand. You were a child caught between warring parents. There are no consequences for you, Zoe. Only a father who loves you unconditionally. Even though I didn't always treat you with respect, tears shimmered in her eyes. Even though I believed you were a failure, even then, Barrett assured her. Always. Zoe wiped at her eyes. I want to understand you better, Dad. The real you, not the version Mom described or the version you pretended to be. Barrett smiled slightly. I'd like that. But I need you to understand something too. Zoe continued, her voice strengthening. I can't just abandon Mom, no matter what she did to you. She's still my mother. I would never ask you to choose, Barrett said sincerely. Your relationship with your mother is yours to define, not mine. Zoe nodded, relief evident in her expression. There's something else. Max came to Mom's hotel this morning. She hesitated. What happened? Barrett's voice sharpened. Nothing violent, Zoe assured him. But he blamed her for everything. Said she ruined his life by lying about you. It was ugly, Dad. Really ugly. He called her terrible things. Barrett's expression hardened. Did he threaten her? Not physically, but he said he'd make sure she suffered like he was suffering. Zoe looked troubled. I've never seen someone so broken and angry at the same time. Barrett made a mental note to have Lyle increase security around Natalie's hotel. Whatever his feelings about his ex-wife, he wouldn't allow her to be threatened. Max will leave Seattle soon, Barrett predicted. There's nothing left for him here. His reputation in the business community is finished. Because you made sure of it, Zoe observed. Because he made choices that led to this outcome, Barrett corrected. I simply revealed the truth. The rest happened naturally. Their dinner concluded with tentative plans for the future. Zoe would continue living with Olivia for now, but would spend weekends with Barrett. They would rebuild their relationship on honest ground, one step at a time. As Barrett walked her to Olivia's car, Zoe paused. One last question, Dad. Was it worth it? All of this? Barrett considered the question carefully. Ask me again in a year, he finally said, when the dust has settled and we can see clearly what remains. Zoe nodded, then hugged him, the first genuine embrace they'd shared in years. Good night, Dad. Good night, sweetheart. As Barrett watched the car pull away, his phone rang. It was Flynn. It's done, his friend reported. Holloway Development Group is officially part of Thorne Innovations. The papers are signed, the money transferred. And Max left the building with a cardboard box and a security escort. Thomas Reed says he was not gracious in defeat. Barrett wasn't surprised. Have Lyle arrange additional security for Natalie. Max may redirect his anger toward her. Already done, Flynn assured him. Also, the Seattle Business Journal wants an interview about the acquisition. Your call if you want to go public now or maintain the low profile. Barrett considered the question. Schedule the interview. It's time to step out of the shadows. On my terms. 3 days later, Barrett sat in his office, reviewing the final acquisition documents when Ava buzzed through. Mr. Thorne, Natalie Kingston is here. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent. Barrett sighed. Send her up. When Natalie entered, Barrett barely recognized her. Gone was the polished, confident woman who had dominated Seattle's social scene. In her place stood someone diminished. Designer clothes replaced by simple attire. Perfect makeup absent, eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. Thank you for seeing me, she said quietly, remaining standing even when Barrett gestured to a chair. What can I do for you, Natalie? Nothing, she admitted. That's not why I'm here. I came to apologize. Properly. Barrett waited, expression neutral. I made terrible choices, Natalie continued. I judge you based on wealth rather than character. I taught our daughter to do the same. I left when I thought you couldn't give me the lifestyle I wanted. She paused, gathering herself. I was wrong, Barrett. Deeply, unforgivably wrong. Yes, Barrett agreed calmly. You were. Natalie flinched slightly at his direct agreement, but pressed on. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I understand now. What I threw away. Who you really are. And who am I, Natalie? Barrett asked, curious despite himself. Someone who never forgot. Never forgave. She met his gaze directly. Someone who waited patiently for years to deliver justice. Barrett didn't deny it. Is that all you came to say? Natalie hesitated. Max is gone. He left Seattle yesterday. Before he left, he blamed me for everything. Said I destroyed his life by lying about you. And did you lie about me, Natalie? Or did you simply not know the truth? Both, she admitted. I didn't know how successful you really were, but I convinced myself you were a failure to justify leaving. I needed you to be less than you were so I could feel better about my choice. Barrett nodded, appreciating her honesty if nothing else. I've lost everything, Natalie continued. My relationship, my social standing, most of my friends, my daughter's respect. She paused. Was that your plan all along? Total destruction. My plan was to live my life authentically, Barrett replied. To build something meaningful. To be there for my daughter. You and Max forced the confrontation, not me. Natalie nodded slowly. I understand. And I won't bother you again after today. She hesitated. I just want to know if there's any part of you that remembers what we once had, before it all went wrong. Barrett studied her for a long moment. I remember, he finally said. But memory isn't forgiveness, Natalie. It's just acknowledgement of what was, not absolution for what came after. I see. Natalie straightened, dignity reasserting itself despite everything. Thank you for your time. And Barrett, take care of Zoe.